Just this sword skill alone still isn't enough for me to defeat First Ancestor Human Emperor. Qin Mu put away his sword and looked at Supreme Emperor Heaven that was shrouded in darkness. When he did that, the astonishing sword light in the sky vanished. On the battlefield, crackling flames were still blazing, yet to be extinguished. The smell of burning flesh was everywhere. Qin Mu had vented all of his emotions and feelings in that sword earlier and reached a height that he had never achieved before. However, there was still quite a large difference between First Ancestor Human Emperor and him. Yet without First Ancestor Human Emperor's pressure and without the encounter in the Dark Realm, it would have been very hard for him to take that step, to walk out a village chief's sword picture, of butcher's knife skills. When he had stabbed with that sword, it hadn't been just him founding a sword skill that belonged to him. He had also attacked the dark clouds that had been clouding his heart lately. Donghua looked at his back. The youth's sword training on the sacrificial altar left a deep impression on her. It was especially so for his last move, when he had tapped the heart of his brows and stabbed with a sword. The mood hidden inside it had unleashed on a great scale. Suddenly, she could almost see a world changing due to a reform, countless ambitious people fighting in foul wind and bloody rain, rushing forward after someone. In the sword skills that Qin Mu had executed earlier, their intricacy had dispersed the spirit. Even though sword treading mountains and rivers was imposing and had the spirit of a heavenly god advancing courageously, it was only describing the mountains and rivers. Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood was overflowing with murderous intent and was overbearing, having the aptitude of the sword god, but the sword will was commemorating the martyrs, still obsessed with the past. Calamity of High Emperor was full of sorrowful, describing the death of High Emperor era. These three sword skills had their pros, but they also had their cons. In terms of spirit, Donghua felt that they were all inferior to Qin Mu's last move. As to which were better in battle, she couldn't say clearly. Superb sword skill. She stood up and came to Qin Mu's side. What sword skill was that? Calamity sword. Qin Mu turned his head and saw her walking over. She then raised her head to look into the distance. Suddenly, a gale swept in their faces and transformed into an incomparably handsome tiger. It had yellow and black stripes, which were swirling with the movement of the fur and looking extraordinarily impressive. Small tufts of soft fur grew on his ears as well, able to rotate in all directions. Superb sword skill. That sword skill was indeed impressive. The tiger god walked up the stone steps of the sacrificial altar. When he was halfway up, his feet left the ground and he transformed into a tiger-headed god which walked up to Qin Mu. His voice boomed when he spoke. Why is it called Calamity Sword? The tiger god was Saint Woodcutter's mount who had been summoned to this world along its lord. He had carried Saint Woodcutter into battle and was very brave. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly. The black tiger god returning from the front lines meant that its lord had quelled the devil gods in the front lines. The change of heaven and earth means a great calamity. Heaven and earth may change not only because of natural disasters, invasion of heavenly devils, nor people dying to fire and floods. The change of heaven and earth is also a change in thinking of the people, and a reform of divine arts, turning skills into great Tao. The tiger god turned to him and sneered as he walked up. Changing the people's hearts, divine arts, laws, paths, what a haughty tone. Just your sword skill alone, can it change this world, change this universe, change the thinking of every living being? Your sword skill isn't bad, but your heart is too ambitious. Qin Mu's gaze became fervent, and his tone filled with excitement. If people's hearts change, they won't fear gods anymore. And when people won't fear gods, the gods will have no power. When this happens, divine arts will be free to be changed. With that, laws will change and so will the paths. Just like that, the heaven and earth will change too. Donghua looked at the youth beside her who was full of spirit. Even when facing the black tiger god with extraordinary aura, he wasn't fearful in the least. Qin Mu raised his hand and pointed at the miserable battlefield in the darkness. His voice was slightly hoarse, but it was also heart-gripping in the night. Look! This is the calamity gods and devils have thrown on us. For the people to keep the gods and devils in awe, to fear and respect, worship them. My calamity sword then shall open the calamity of changing people's heart, one of changing divine arts and paths. From there I'll change the world. He became more and more passionate. Even though Donghua couldn't understand what he was saying, She could sense the passion burning in his heart. The youth seemed to have an infectious charm that could make people listen to him, unable to resist getting influenced by his emotions. That black tiger god came to the bottom of the sacrificial altar in a few steps. His body far surpassed that of Qin Mu and the rest, and so put extremely strong pressure on them. This tiger god looked down at Qin Mu before smiling as his whiskers spread apart. I knew you were remarkable. I don't understand all you've said, but I felt that they were powerful words. What's the name of this move of yours? Qin Mu raised his head to look up at him and said solemnly, This sword skill is called Opening Calamity. The black tiger god was slightly stunned. Opening the calamity for the change in people's heart? For the change in divine arts? For the change in paths? Great name. Donghua also understood some of it. The youth beside her that had come from a different world was going to send a calamity to the gods and devils that were making their lives miserable. And so the skill was called Opening Calamity. It walked the route of reform, improving the ways of the past and changing the lives of gods and devils. How many moves does your calamity sword have? The black tiger god asked. Qin Mu blushed and muttered, So far only one move. I feel that I've already used up all my knowledge just to create this move. That should be about right. You couldn't have accumulated much at your age. The whiskers of the black tiger god stuck to his face. At your age, to be able to found a sword skill is already pretty remarkable. I'm under the orders of my lord to fetch you. He is coming to blows with someone and needs you. Follow me. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, but he couldn't help growing excited. Saint Woodcutter wants to see me? The black tiger god returned to his true form and said, Didn't you hear clearly? He was fighting with someone when he suddenly thought of you, so he wants you to go over. Come on to my back. There are still dangers on the path with the devils running around, so you couldn't reach the place by yourself. Saint Woodcutter is fighting with someone. Bah, if he is fighting, why does he need me there? Qin Mu was puzzled, but he still jumped onto his back. Donghua hurriedly jumped up as well while saying, My father is also on the front lines, I want to look for him. The gorgeous tiger god in black and yellow sprinted to the front lines. His speed was extremely fast. Even though his body was huge, he was covered with lean muscles and was completely silent when he ran. There was no sound at all. Much faster than Fatty Dragon. Qin Mu gripped his fists tightly and suddenly felt his heart aching. Even though the dragon Qilin was much faster than before, his steps were still heavy and would even shatter mountain rocks when he ran at full speed. Donghua looked at the pitch-black night, slightly worried. They had left the battlefield and leaped across the front lines. They were heading for Li City, in which the devils had their camp. Many devil gods gathered there, and among them was also true devil Fu Riluo. Back when Li City had been invaded, it was Fu Riluo who had attacked personally. He executed his devil technique and massacred countless people in the city. Even 2 true gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven were killed by him. He was truly fearsome. The black tiger god leaped across the army and went straight for the city. With such actions, wasn't he just seeking death? How do the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven determine if a person has the aptitude of a true god? Qin Mu remembered asked a girl beside him after remembering it. How do you guys cultivate? Donghua suppressed the unease in her heart and said, First, we look at the aptitude. Spirit bodies that have the aptitudes of kings won't have bad aptitudes. If they get a famed teacher, their corporeal bodies can reach the extent of a young true god. Other than that, our Supreme Emperor Heaven also has a test that is called God Suppression Pagoda. Those who are able to walk out of the pagoda will be recognized as those who have the aptitude of a true god. Qin Mu blinked at her. God Suppression Pagoda? What is it? Before Donghua could answer, the black tiger god's voice reached them. God Suppression Pagoda is a treasure from founding emperor era, and is used to test the attainments of a corporeal body. If a person one can pass, it doesn't really mean that they have the aptitude of a true god, just that their corporeal body barely reaches the extent of a young true god. Among those who have passed God Suppression Pagoda in Supreme Emperor Heaven, at most half have the aptitude of a true god. Being a true god is beyond difficult, so where's the logic in anyone becoming a true god just by cultivating the techniques of true god diligently? Donghua also couldn't help becoming curious. Senior, in that case, what is considered to have the aptitude of a true god? The true aptitude does not only lie in the corporeal body, but also in the primordial spirit, which is split in spirit and soul. Has your spirit embryo reached the aptitude of a true God? Has your soul reached the aptitude of a true God? Other than primordial spirit, there's still the frame of mind. But even if reaches the God realm, it still isn't enough to become a true God, because other those things, there's also divine arts and paths, the Black Tiger God explained. The divine arts practitioners who you guys see as having the aptitude of a true God are still a long way from becoming such. For example, "Youth, what is your name?" "My name is Chinmu." He then hurriedly added, "The current Heavenly Saint Cult Master." Heavenly Saint Cult Master? Never heard before. Chinmu's expression became black. Ever since Heavenly Devil Cult was founded, everyone had viewed Saint Woodcutter and the Patriarch and the sacred teachers. Never would they have expected for his mount to not have even heard of them. The Black Tiger then continued with his speech. "For example, Chinmu, his abilities aren't weak, but in your eyes his corporeal body has not reached the aptitude of a true God. Yet with his strong abilities, he's able to fight against those so-called divine arts practitioners with the aptitude of a true God. That's because I'm the Overlord body," Chinmu said with excitement. "Overlord body? Never heard before." The Black Tiger God sprinted through the night while speaking. "Your sword skill is almost close to the realm of path, so your comprehension of paths, skills, and divine arts is almost at the aptitude of a true God. Your frame of mind is slightly weaker though and not strong enough. As for the primordial spirit, it's very powerful and can be considered first class among the divine arts practitioners of the current generation. That's why he has the strength to fight against young experts with the aptitude of a true God. We're at Lee City." In front of them, flames rushed into the sky. A magnificent city was shrouded in the light. On top of it, devil gods and countless devils stood. Sanghua looked at this sight in fear. Yet the devil gods and devils didn't stop the Black Tiger God, letting them into the city without a word. Sanghua was extremely nervous. The Black Tiger God had brought them into the enemy's nest, so could he have turned sides? However, he is a god. There would have been no need to lie to us. If he wanted to kill us, he could have just taken us down or eaten us. Even though logic said that, she still felt nervous in her heart. After all, they were in the enemy's camp. The devil race had existed in Supreme Emperor Heaven for some 20,000 years, and in her memory, they were all fiendish and utterly evil. If anyone landed in their hands, it would be fortunate for them to find death. And now they were in their camp. She looked around and saw countless devils staring at them. The heavenly devils sent chills down her back. They looked like hungry beasts hiding in the darkness, ready to pounce and tear them into pieces. Sanghua's palms were covered in cold sweat. Her gaze landed on one devil god, and she couldn't shift it away. That man was topless, but his face didn't look like that of a normal human. There were only groups of flame markings that covered his whole body. His eyes were extremely strange, flickering in his eye sockets like two balls of fire. When he saw them, he smiled. "Young lady, I've seen you before. Your family has died under my hands, right?" Sanghua's hands formed into tight fists, but she didn't say anything. Chinmu took a look at that devil god, and his pupils contracted. He remembered that the first time he met Sanghua, heavenly devils had attacked that city, and Sanghua's father had gone to defend when he was encircled. A devil god had then pushed his way toward Sanghua's family and killed most of the people. Back then the sight had been terrifying. Even though he couldn't see Sanghua's face, he could feel her fear and anger. Chinmu had run everywhere with her, and only then did she survive unscathed. Back then, Chinmu and Sanghua had been in two different worlds, so he couldn't see the face of that devil god clearly, but judging from Sanghua's current expression, he could confirm that this topless devil god was the one that had massacred her family. The style of construction here is quite similar to that of our great ruins. I've seen numerous ruins of founding emperor era, and they are similar to the palaces here. Chinmu suddenly smiled. "Sister Sanghua, your Supreme Emperor Heaven might just be related to our great ruins." He wanted to divert her attention, but she was plagued with matters of the heart and couldn't pay him much attention. The Black Tiger God answered instead. Supreme Emperor Heaven belonged to Founding Emperor. It was part of the first heaven of the 33 heavens, so it's not strange that the buildings look similar. Supreme Emperor Heaven is from founding Emperor era? Qin Mu's heart trembled violently and he cried out, "What kind of place is 33 heavens? Hasn't founding Emperor era ended?" The Black Tiger God was bewildered. Founding Emperor era has ended? When did that happen? How could it have ended when founding emperor is still alive? As long as founding emperor is still alive, founding emperor era will never end. Qin Mu was flustered, and his heart pounded crazily. Founding emperor era had yet to end. This news was too shocking. He immediately thought of his encounters in Great Ruins in Fengdu, how the Heavenly King's god statue had acted on founding emperor's orders, and rode the dragon Qilin to kill the Dragon King, and how King Yama of Fengdu had mentioned founding emperor going to Carefree Village. These two matters were clear signs that founding emperor era had not yet ended. However, when the Black Tiger God said this personally, it still gave Qin Mu a great shock. Your frame of mind is unstable, so it will be bad for your fight later. The Black Tiger God was stern and his voice loud. Your attainments in frame of mind aren't great to begin with, so won't you at least stabilize your mind? Qin Mu was muddle-headed. He asked in puzzlement, "What fight? We're here." The Black Tiger God suddenly stopped, and his body trembled, pushing Qin Mu and Donghua off. When the two of them landed on the ground, the Black Tiger God shook and transformed back into a tiger-headed god. He looked down and frowned at the two people. He then said loudly, "Mu Lord, these two people are useless. Their minds are all flustered. They will probably lose miserably if you send them to fight." Donghua had seen the devil god that had almost wiped out her whole family, and her mind was agitated, making it hard for her to restrain herself. Qin Mu's mind was also shaken, but his by the information the Black Tiger God had told him. He was still in a daze, so neither of them was in a good state now. However, after hearing the Black Tiger God's words, the two of them came back to their senses and looked ahead of themselves. The sight astonished them. The palaces up ahead, laid out in a picturesque disorder, were extremely strange. Some of them were bathed in fire, but not destroyed. The flames seemed to be emanated by the palaces themselves, even though it left them almost transparent from the scorching heat. The youths could see the interior of the palaces from the outside. The flames lighted up the whole city like it was daytime. In the sky above the palaces, gods and devils were facing each other, and Qin Mu immediately saw Saint Woodcutter. He also saw numerous gods standing behind him. Among them was Donghua's father. Opposite them was a devil god that did not look like a devil, but was even somewhat refined and graceful. The only problem was that he didn't have ears. In the place of his left ear there was a face, and it was the same where his right ear was supposed to be. Qin Mu couldn't see his back, so he didn't know if there was a face on the back of his head too. Suddenly, a black pillar rose that was several yards thick. It was like a black pagoda that stabbed diagonally the vast courtyard. An unbelievably huge axe was also sent into the plaza. That axe was almost as thick as the black pillar. Only now did Qin Mu notice that it wasn't a black pillar, nor was it a black pagoda, but a huge spear. It crossed with Saint Woodcutter's axe and stood upright in the plaza. The two spirit weapons were too large, and cracks formed on the ground from the pressure. "Enter the plaza." The Black Tiger God hurried them. "Once the people in front die, it will be your turn." Qin Mu and Donghua walked forward to the borders of the plaza. There were several divine arts practitioners inside, all covered in blood. They were all adjusting their breaths while standing with armor. They should have come from the battlefield. On the other side, there were also other young divine arts practitioners, but they were devils. They should have also come from the battlefield, since a few had injuries. They all looked fierce and brave. "My lord, they are here." The Black Tiger God bowed to Saint Woodcutter in the sky above. "Why are their minds not peaceful?" The Black Tiger God immediately answered, "The cultivation of his frame of mind is simply too weak." When he heard it was still founding emperor era now, his soul wandered off. Saint Woodcutter gave him a stare, and the two long ears moved back and stuck to the back of the tiger god's head. He became submissive and didn't dare to talk. Saint Woodcutter looked at Qin Mu, who was flipped through his tautai sack before taking out a chunk of black iron. He then poked at the fire emanating from the palace. "Mine not at ease and a bouncy temper. I wonder if he's useful? Could I have been wrong in my judgment? He clearly wasn't that curious and lively in the battlefield." The black iron in Qin Mu's hand was immediately affected by the heat and got scorching to the touch. Qin Mu threw it down without any hesitation. The flames on the chunk of black iron had yet to extinguish when it became a pile of molten iron. It kept burning though, and in not even a breath's time it changed into ashes. No wonder this place is called Li City. This is actually Li Fire. Saint Woodcutter frowned slightly while a junior behind him cried out in astonishment, breaking the silence. Not only is there Li Fire, but there's even Devil Fire. Qin Mu stated. The Black Tiger God couldn't help explaining. This place was conquered by the devils and their fire is hidden inside Li Fire, which is their scheme. Don't touch it and be careful of burning yourself to death. That's right. How did you know there's Devil Fire in Li Fire? Li Fire has high heat and is good for forging since it can easily melt black iron, but it won't burn it cleanly, Qin Mu explained. Devil Fire has a very terrifying corrosive characteristic, but its temperature isn't high. What melted black iron was Li Fire while what burned it cleanly away was Devil Fire. Suddenly his eyes shined, and the Black Tiger God jumped in shock. Devil Fire can be used to smelt spirit weapons while Li Fire is an even better divine fire. This trip is great. My sword pellet can be improved even more. Qin Mu cried out in excitement. Mute had taught him the marvel of smelting, and he knew the use of every kind of fire. Now that he could see two of them, he couldn't help becoming excited. He immediately took out an iron board and a frame before taking out a black iron hammer. Brother Tiger, you don't know it, but my sword pellet has already been cultivated to the flexibility of wrapping around a finger. Another step forward would be like flowing water. All this time I couldn't find any high-quality flames, but now I finally found some. Qin Mu took out his sword pellet and looked at the dumbfounded Black Tiger God. He said with a smile, Devil Fire can burn away black iron, but it can't burn black gold essence. My swords are made out of black gold essence with divine metal mixed into it. By smelting them with the Devil Fire, I can remove the impurities. The gods and devils in the surroundings were stunned. They saw Qin Mu quickly constructing a smelting table before taking out a black felt apron to tie around his waist. He threw the flying swords onto the smelting table, then picked one to stuff into the flames. Clang! The sound of beating metal dispersed the solemn atmosphere. Qin Mu hammered each and every one of his spirit weapons seriously. Every strike of his was fully focused. The one who threshes grains. Sanghua called out softly. How do you know how to forge treasures too? Qin Mu didn't raise his head when he said humbly, I've learned it for over 10 years so I'm slightly better at it than algebra. Sanghua stuck out her tongue and looked at him forging. Her heart suddenly calmed down from its flustered state. When her father had seen her having come as well, he frowned slightly and opened his mouth. However, he resisted speaking. Clang, clang, clang. Qin Mu forged continuously. Even though there were over a dozen gods and devils around, the only sound was that of him beating metal, and it was irritating everyone. Suddenly, the devil god opposite of Saint Woodcutter turned his head to face him with another face. He said pleasantly, Fu Riluo has finally met the heavenly master of the fake celestial heavens from back then. It's true that your reputation can't be compared to meeting you in person. This successor of yours is truly interesting, but are you sure you want him to fight for you? Saint Woodcutter had an indifferent expression. Cultivating a heart is like forging ironware. His heart was uneasy earlier, so he's merely using forging to calm his flustered emotions for his inner heart to calm down. This is a kind of profound cultivation method for the frame of mind, Fu Riluo. Can't you see that? Clang, clang, clang. Qin Mu swung his huge hammer up and smacked the blades non-stop. He didn't look like he was cultivating his heart at all. Instead, he looked like he was really forging ironware. The corners of Saint Woodcutter's eyes twitched, and he almost couldn't put up a straight face anymore. Why is he still beating them? Below, Qin Mu put away the swords that were done and took out another huge batch to be calcined in the fire. Veins popped out on Saint Woodcutter's forehead, but they were forced down by him straight away. Fu Riluo laughed loudly. It's hard for you to get rid of me, and I also can't get rid of you. In that case, let these juniors fight for us. Heavenly Master, if my side wins, you shall scram back and continue envisioning your beautiful dream. If your side wins, I'll leave Li City to you. Saint Woodcutter hesitated for a moment, and the clanging reached his ears once more. Qin Mu was still beating the iron seriously. Nearby, Brilliant's injured city lord said in a low voice, "Heavenly Master, don't worry, my Supreme Emperor Heaven also has young talents. They are all youths with the aptitude of a true god, and they won't be any weaker than Fu Riluo's disciple." Saint Woodcutter looked at Qin Mu was still beating the iron, and he could only nod. Saint Woodcutter looked at the opposite side where a few devil gods had brought their proud students. Those young devil experts were all overflowing with fierce auras. Every one of them had terrifying corporeal bodies and were extremely strong. They were obviously experts that had been through life and death. He'd fought with the devils before and deeply knew the strength of this race. Purely based on corporeal body, even if the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven had the aptitude of a true god, they would still be slightly inferior. On top of that, because there were many battles in Supreme Emperor Heaven, they frequently had to fight with the devils, so it was difficult for them to form schools and academies like Eternal Peace did. They also couldn't form large-scale sects, so it was usually gods finding outstanding talents to personally teach them. There were advantages and disadvantages to doing so. The advantages were that with the personal teachings of the gods and devils, every one of them was elites with extremely powerful abilities. There were no flaws in the inheritance of paths, skills, and divine arts in Supreme Emperor Heaven. Even god-level techniques could be passed down. For example, Donghua. She was personally taught by her father Sang Yi. The disadvantage was that one person could only learn what their master had to teach, and that's it. They found it very difficult to learn other people's ultimate arts. For example, Donghua cultivated Sang Ye's technique and divine arts, so she had never learned a divine art that he did not possess. Even if she learned it, the other party wouldn't be able to teach her as diligently as Sang Yi. Without learning the techniques and divine arts of others, one could only be skilled in a specialized area, but this resulted in the paths, skills, and divine arts of Supreme Emperor Heaven not showing any improvement. They were much inferior to those of Eternal Peace. Qin Mu was able to see that, which meant that Saint Woodcutter could naturally see it too. He looked at the youth who was still forging and couldn't help doubting himself. "When I saw him in danger in the battlefield, I executed a divine art that he could comprehend, and he learned it immediately, escaping successfully. By right, this successor of mine should have unmatched talent and have cultivated the technique I had passed down to the degree of perfection, which was why he was able to comprehend my divine art in an instant. Yet why has he become so unreliable now? Could my judgment have really been wrong?" At that moment, a god walked over and bowed. "Heavenly Master, the 7 Stars Realm's experts of Supreme Emperor Heaven are here." Saint Woodcutter looked at them and nodded gently. "Let them come in." Donghua looked around, and her eyes suddenly lit up. "The one who threshes grains, that girl is called Yuhi. She's the #1 divine arts practitioner of 7 Stars Realm." Qin Mu pulled out a sword from the firewall and examined it. The heat still wasn't there yet, so he stuffed it back in. Donghua was beyond excited. She said to Qin Mu, "Yuhi is the disciple of true god Pang Yu and has passed through the test of god suppression pagoda. She has slain 3 devil experts at the level of a young true devil, and is acclaimed as the #1 in 7 Stars Realm. That's her, the girl who bunned up her hair so high that it looks like a small pagoda. She's very pretty." The black tiger god looked over at the girl called Yuhi, who had a cold expression. She removed her earrings, bracelets, and tidied her clothes. It was evident that she was ready for a life and death struggle. "She's indeed not bad and expert," the black tiger god praised. She removed the extra accessories from her body for her movements to be unrestricted. She can be said to have been forged in hundreds of battles. "The one who threshes grains, look. The top 10 divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm are all here." "Wait, that's not right, there are 2 people missing. Could they have died in battle?" Qin Mu focused on his forging and shook to transform into the true form of Mercury Sovereign. He drew cold water vapor to cool down the sword. He then grabbed the flying sword and poured his vital qi in. Rubbing his hands, he turned the shiny sword into a pellet. He then nodded in satisfaction. Donghua was ineffably excited. "Look, that's Shu Yao. His master is true god Yenshua, but he, unfortunately, died in the last fight with Fu Riluo. However, Shu Yao is indeed abnormally powerful. He has the manner of a master and his technique is overbearing while his divine arts are fierce. What he walks is the route of the corporeal body becoming that of a saint. The black tiger god looked at Xu Yao and saw that this youth had a calm bearing that wouldn't be alarmed even if the heaven fell. Even when faced with so many gods and devils, he didn't have a change in expression. He's much steadier than the one who threshes grains that looked around in wonder all the time. This Xu Yao is also an expert, the black tiger god praised. Xu Yao walked over. He was an extremely earnest youth, and his bearing was extraordinary calm. The few people beside him were also extremely unordinary. Every one of them, no matter if it was a boy or girl, they all had thick murderous aura surrounding them. All of them should have just come from the battlefield. Donghua was excited to the highest level. These people that could walk out of God's suppression pagoda are all young experts, and each of them is legendary. That's Huang Yu over there. He has been through numerous big battles and is known for his outstanding military service. He's also the disciple of true God Pang Yu, and was the fastest to pass through God's suppression pagoda. It's just that his ranking is a little low, at rank 3. Qin Mu put away all the flying swords he had finished refining while stuffing all the others into leaf fire to continue working non-stop. The black tiger god looked at Huang Yu, who was obviously a martial maniac. Even under such a situation, he was still cultivating. He didn't forget to execute his technique even when he was walking, and clouds floated above his head. His technique was very strange, and he had already cultivated his primordial spirit. Even though he couldn't project it yet, he could already have it breathe vital qi in and out. The clouds above his head were visions formed from his primordial spirit, condensing his vital qi. The cultivation of this man is extremely dense. The eyes of the black tiger god lit up and he praised, "Another martial maniac, but his thoughts are very pure. He doesn't have any other thoughts besides growing stronger, so his frame of mind is naturally great. The one who threshes grains and long braid girl, you too should learn from him." Donghua knew that he was giving her pointers and hurriedly nodded. The black tiger god looked at Qin Mu, who took out another bunch of flying swords to stab them into the fire. He smacked another one with his hammer to refine away the impurities within it. The black tiger god's complexion turned black. Yuhi looked over and her gaze landed on Qin Mu, who was busy forging his swords. She frowned slightly and asked Donghua, "Junior sister Donghua, this person is?" Donghua looked at her in admiration and replied with a smile, "This is Qin Mu. He's from another world. His qin is the qin from threshing grains. Senior sister, you've become world famous in the battle in Shur City." Yuhi's expression fell. However, Shur City still fell into the enemy's hands. The devil's abilities are indeed slightly stronger than ours. However, the divine arts practitioners of my Supreme Emperor Heaven are no weaker than the devils who are just relying on their numbers. Xu Yao walked over and gave Donghua a gentle smile. "Sister Donghua, you haven't entered God's suppression pagoda yet, right? I see your abilities are also extraordinary and have improved a lot since we last met. You will definitely be able to pass the test of God's suppression pagoda." Donghua's chest brimmed with pride. Xu Yao looked at Qin Mu and slightly frowned. He asked in a low voice, "This is Qin Mu who threshes the grains." Yuhi felt helpless. He's from another world and his temper is a little weird. He came all the way here to forge. Donghua blushed and said in a low voice, "Qin Mu is very powerful. He has a gate that I've never seen before. Wherever it passes, nothing will live. He killed many experts of the devil race. He also has a moonjade eyes that killed Fu Yuxiao in one shot. His attainments in algebra are extremely high, but his medical expertise is even higher. His forging is also better than his algebra. Fu Riluo's disciple Fu Yuxiao was killed by him?" Everyone was astonished and they all looked at Qin Mu only to see him still forging. Yuhi said with a calm expression, "The treasures of this senior brother Qin are truly extraordinary." The others all nodded. Fu Yuxiao was famous among the younger generation as an expert of celestial being realm. For Qin Mu to be able to kill Fu Yuxiao, it had to have been due to the power of that so-called moonjade eye. It isn't entirely the credit of the treasure, since it was accomplished only because of the one who threshes grains' very high attainments in algebra. He said he had relied on algebra to calculate the next step of Fu Yuxiao to be able to shoot him. While saying that, Donghua became less and less confident. Algebra. Everyone shook their heads, and Huang Yu said indifferently, "What use is algebra? Not only will it not increase one's battle power, but it will also take up the time from cultivation." The Black Tiger God gave a cough and said solemnly, "Everyone, go and calm down your minds first. There will be fierce battles later. My lord has already fought with Fu Riluo numerous times just now, but the outcome was hard to determine, so a new idea was brought up. The younger generation shall fight to determine the ownership of Li City. We'll need to use everyone's abilities if we'll want to take back Li City." Xu Yao looked at Qin Mu, who was still forging, and said with a frown, "How can we calm our minds with this senior brother forging over here?" The others all nodded. The Black Tiger God looked at them helplessly. "Please pardon him. His frame of mind isn't like yours, so he needs to rely on forging to stabilize it." Suddenly, Huang Yu's gaze fell with intensity on the other side, and his voice grew slightly hoarse. "Zhehuali, Fu Riluo's proudest disciple. I've met him on the battlefield, and in the darkness I almost died in his hands. Luckily, reinforcements came on time." Xu Yao also stared at that young devil expert. The knife on his back trembled, giving off knife cries. The young expert then said in a low voice, "I've also exchanged blows with him and lost. Maybe only senior sister He can defeat him." Yuhi's gaze landed on Zhehuali and she shook her head. "I encountered him in the battlefield just now. Even though we were broken up by the battle formation after 2 moves, it was enough for me to determine his abilities. I'm not 100% confident in defeating him. You guys must be careful when fighting him." The Black Tiger God looked at the young expert of the devil race and was slightly stunned. Up ahead was a cultured and refined youth. Based on his appearance, one couldn't see that he was a devil at all. That's not right. He isn't a devil, but a human. The Black Tiger God's heart trembled slightly, and he instantly realized Zhehuali's background. He said in a low voice, "He's not only the disciple of Fu Riluo, but someone from the upper bound." Yuhi, Xu Yao, and Huang Yu were all astonished. They wanted to ask for details, but the Black Tiger God leaped into the sky. He said to Saint Woodcutter, "My lord, something is wrong with the origin of that Zhehuali. He's not a devil, so he should have come from the upper bound." Saint Woodcutter nodded and looked at the other side. He said solemnly, "Fu Riluo, it seems you are also related to the so-called celestial heavens. This disciple of yours is from the upper bound. I wonder which high god is he the disciple of?" Fu Riluo laughed loudly and said leisurely, "Zhehuali has a stable foundation and his devil technique is right behind mine. His abilities are outstanding, and he is the disciple that I think the most highly of. However, your guess isn't wrong and his background is great. He has another master and you also know him. This person is the knife god who calls himself Wushuang. You've exchanged blows before." Saint Woodcutter's expression sunk and he nodded. "Divine Knife Luo Wushang, the top general of Spirit Elite Guards. He's indeed an old friend. Never would I have thought that you would actually become related to him." The ears of Qin Mu, who had been forging, suddenly twitched, and he placed the iron hammer in his hand. He raised his head and asked Sang Hua, "What guards? What Wushuang?" "Spirit Elite Guards Luo Wushuang." He said indifferently, "My master true god Pang, you had mentioned him. Luo Wushuang is a broken arm knife god of the ancient times. A true god with very powerful knife skills. He only has one arm, but his knife skills have reached perfection." Qin Mu was stunned. He suddenly recalled the night 40,000 years ago, and the Luo Wushuang of the Spirit Elite Guards that he had encountered. That night, he had stood on the chest to cover for the escape and cut off one of Luo Wushuang's arm. Could the 2 Luo Wushuangs be the same person? Qin Mu hurriedly looked at Zhehuali, and Xu Yao smiled as he inquired, "Senior brother Qin, who threshes the grains, why aren't you forging anymore?" Qin Mu didn't answer, and Zhehuali on the opposite side immediately felt his gaze. He raised his head and their eyes met. Qin Mu's gaze landed on Zhehuali's back, where he saw a long knife that was very demonic and evil. There was an eye on its hilt. That eye suddenly opened and stared at Qin Mu. Zhehuali saw Qin Mu's face and was slightly stunned. His expression filled with disbelief, and he took out a scroll from his chest. He examined it and took another look at Qin Mu before suddenly smiling in delight. Qin Mu's gaze was fixated on that demon knife when he said solemnly, "Sister Sanghua, if I tell you that the arm of divine knife Luo Wushuang had been cut off by me, will you believe me? Divine knife Luo Wushuang's arm was cut off by you?" Everyone in the surroundings found it extremely preposterous. Even the most stable Shu Yao couldn't help bursting into laughter. "Senior brother Qin who threshes the grains, just focus your mind on forging." Qin Mu looked away, but his expression became strangely serious. Suddenly Yu He, Huang Yu, Shu Yao, Sanghua, and the rest moved a step away from Qin Mu, bewildered. For that instant, they felt that this youth forging beside them had suddenly become a sword that was about to be unsheathed. Light rays had been about to burst forth in all directions. His acute spirit was threatening, but it was left in the sword sheath without being drawn. The youth had moved because of natural instinct, avoiding a terrifying fighting spirit and murderous intent. Clang clang. The sound of metal being beaten rang out as Qin Mu went back to the smelting table, focusing on hammering his flying swords. Everyone couldn't help doubting that if it was their senses that had went wild for a moment. Meanwhile, on the other side, a female devil beside Jahuali took a glance and said in astonishment, "The person in your painting looks like that brat forging on the other side." Shahuali rolled up the painting and put it away. He said indifferently, "My master has been looking for him for a long time. He said that the reason his knife skills reached such a level was all thanks to him. Old man executed his sword skill for me to see before I left for the lower bound and gave this painting to me. He wanted me to find that person and execute his knife skills to show him." The female devil couldn't help shuddering as she chuckled. "Your master seems to be quite concerned about him. His order for you is to make this forging brat see how powerful his knife skills are. I can feel the hatred in your master's heart, but there should also be a hint of respect. However, that forging brat is only a youth, so how could he have caught the attention of your master? This I do not know." Shahuali's gaze landed on Qin Mu. "Just a few months ago, master even crossed realms to contact me, saying that the person he wanted to find has appeared. He asked me to take a trip to that world to look for him. However, with the incoming big battle, I didn't have the time to go that world. Never did I expect to encounter him here." He let out a shaky breath and added in a low voice, "For the knife god to view him so highly, I'd like to meet him very much." Qin Mu, who was forging, revealed no emotions and just continued to forge his flying swords without a care. However, Shahuali could still sense that his gaze was making this youth uncomfortable. When his gaze landed on Qin Mu's body, he could clearly see the youth adjusting his posture. Shahuali's smile, unable to quell his excitement. The eye on the demon knife also became excited and rotated a few rounds, increasing in size and becoming bloody. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice rang out. "Heavenly Master, since everyone is already here, let us begin. Should we set any rules?" "Rules? Where are the rules in a life and death struggle?" Fu Riluo laughed loudly, and in the courtyard the black spear trembled. The plaza cracked, and explosions came from the ground as ravines spread out in all directions. The footing of Qin Mu and the rest instantly became unstable. They hurriedly roused their vital qi. Saint Woodcutter raised his eyebrows, and the huge axe also shook to fight with the devil's spear. The collision of the two divine weapons suddenly tore the space in the center of the plaza and stretched it. Among the world-shaking explosions, the expressions of Qin Mu and the rest changed drastically. The land under their feet suddenly rose high up. They couldn't even stand with two legs if they wanted to keep them, but had to jump on only one because of the expanding land. The terrain of the plaza under their feet had changed. In an instant, mountains had been raised, and the distance between them was still rapidly growing greater. The power of the two divine weapons collided and actually stretched the plaza as though there was a boundless power creating mountains from nothing at all. Ravines crossed each other and mountains rose and stretched into the distance. This kind of magnificent power made the youths look up in awe. Qin Mu looked at the transformations in front of him in astonishment. The flat plaza was like the blue sea turning into mulberry fields. It was undergoing transformations that could only happen after hundreds of thousands or even millions of years in just a short while. This was the mighty force of gods and devils, the power that mortals couldn't achieve. Only now did he see how much power a true god controlled. It was a power that Xing'an, a god that was pieced together, could never hope of possessing. For Fu Riluo to be able to block Saint Woodcutter, his abilities are indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu's heart shook when he sensed his flying swords. There was a portion of them that had been being calcined in the Li Fire and Devil Fire, and he hadn't summoned them back in time. He immediately called them to himself, and the flying swords rose in the distance. They were over 20 miles from him, but he immediately saw a strange sight. The speed of his flying swords was extremely fast, but the distance between them was gradually increasing. This was obviously due to the gods and devils as they created a world. The speed at which space was expanding surpassed the movement speed of the flying swords. Boom! Suddenly, the space shook violently and the mountains stopped growing. The space stabilized. The flying swords came whooshing over, and Qin Mu raised his hand. The flying swords collided and transformed into a sword pellet which spun in the air. He let out a sigh of relief and looked around. He could no longer see Donghua and the rest. There was an extreme number of mountains in the surroundings, but they weren't especially high. They were like the mountains in the outside world but shrunk over 10 times. Qin Mu sliced a chunk of rock and examined it in detail. He then crushed it into powder. Moments later, the rock turned into fine rune markings which gave off their final glow before dispersing with the wind and vanishing completely. They are indeed not real. Qin Mu straightened his back and looked around. The mountains which stretched up and down into the distance should have been materialized by Fu Riluo and Saint Woodcutter using runes. Their abilities didn't seem to have reached the level where they could create real matter. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice boomed as though it was thunder from outer space. In battles of life and death, there are no rules. This sand table will be their battlegrounds, and each side will have 10 people in total. The side that comes out victorious will be the winner. How is this suggestion? Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Sand table. He raised his head to look toward the source of the voice and saw Fu Riluo and Saint Woodcutter's incomparably huge faces beyond the sky. They looked like planets in outer space. This means that even though the plaza looks countless times larger, it should still be the same from the outside. Qin Mu was endlessly astonished. This kind of thing was simply beyond his imagination. Upon coming, he had already calculated the size of the plaza. It had a palace on each side. They were most likely located in the left Yin and the right Yang. Qin Mu had walked all the way down the main road, then went up the steps to enter the plaza. It was not even 100 yards in width and had a length of 150 yards. Both sides had steps which led to the palaces beside. If one looked down from the sky, the two palaces and plaza would present the divinatory diagram from Li divinatory trigrams, so Li Fire was born. Now the interior space of the plaza had been expanded numerous times, but to the outside world, it still looked 150 by 100 yards. It was still the divinatory diagram from Li divinatory trigram with the two big palace halls. To Saint Woodcutter, Fu Riluo, Pangyu, and the rest of the gods and devils, Qin Mu was located on a small sand table. All of his movements could be clearly seen like the markings on the palm. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. Now he had two roads to take. One road was to retreat back to the side of the big palace hall, and continue to use Li Fire to refine his swords. The other road was to head to the center of the sand table world. That place was where Saint Woodcutter and Fu Riluo's spear were. Instead of searching around, it would be better to go somewhere where everyone knew others would head to. As long as they were smart, they would realize that the first to reach the place where the axe and spear cross would have the upper hand. That was because being a step earlier would allow them to set up traps and formations while waiting for others to deliver themselves. I refined 316 swords. That's enough for me. Qin Mu moved, swiftly increasing his speed to rush toward the center of the sand table world. Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs were executed to their extreme, and he became as fast as flowing light. Boom! His speed surpassed sound, and the wall of air in front of him exploded like a white cloud. Vapor brushed his face as he passed through it. At that moment, Qin Mu heard loud explosions and looked in the direction of the noise. Figures in the distance had also broken through the speed of sound and left behind vapor clouds among the mountains. The circular vapor clouds gradually spread out in an extremely eye-catching manner. There were a total of 19 clouds, and they betrayed 19 experts with incomparably powerful corporeal bodies, surpassing the speed of sound at the same time. It was evident that they had all realized that if they were a step earlier than the others in reaching the place where the axe and the spear crossed, they would be at a great advantage and hold the upper hand. Veins popped on Qin Mu's head. Only now did he realize that he was the slowest among the 20 people in the sand table world. Even Sanghua's speed was actually a bit faster than his. The 19 experts were all people who were equivalent to young true gods. The techniques they cultivated allowed their bodies to reach a height that surpassed Qin Mu. Just like that, the speed that Qin Mu was so proud of finally lost to experts on the same realm. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped and turned to leave. Everyone was heading to where the axe and the spear crossed, so that place would be the most dangerous place instead. Everyone couldn't shake each other off in speed, so the result of running there would be a collision of 20 divine arts practitioners. In the end, it would become a huge and messy brawl. In such a chaotic situation, it was easy for accidents to happen. Even if he possessed better abilities, he could be surrounded and killed. Since it was like that, he might as well not go there. The next moment, the 19 figures that were rushing toward the place where the axe and spear crossed suddenly turned invisible and vanished. He couldn't see where they went. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and his expression became grim. The ones that have survived for so long in Supreme Emperor Heaven are indeed not stupid and have all thought of the same thing. Interesting, I've finally met my match. In that case, I won't look for you guys, but will wait for you to find me. His body suddenly broke through the air and sprinted straight to the borders of the sand table world. Over there was a wall of fire that was dozens of miles high, and the burning palace hall formed the wall between Li Fire and the Devil Fire. After a moment, the sound of iron being beaten came from the sand table world. It could be heard 10 miles away. In no time, Qin Mu saw the first person coming over. It was an alluring girl with a graceful posture. The 10 divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven are all powerful, but you're the weak link. The alluring girl looked at Qin Mu's back and giggled. I don't have the confidence to deal with the other people, so I could only come to take the first credit. Sister. Qin Mu turned his head to give her a radiant smile. You might have stubbed your toe on a hard rock. The waist of the alluring woman was soft as though it was a willow branch in the wind. She swayed left and right as she walked toward Qin Mu and chuckled. How tough could you be? I've seen it just now that your speed is the slowest. Even though it isn't much slower, it showed that your corporeal body's attainments are slightly inferior. But even a slight difference is a world of difference in abilities. Her feet stopped just right before the flying swords that were hidden in a circle around him. The flying swords that Qin Mu had put underground were the first form of sword picture. Sword-treading mountains and rivers. The girl just needed to step forward, and sword-treading mountains and rivers would activate, shredding her apart. She would become a bloody waterfall in the picture of mountains and rivers. However, for her feet to stop just before the trap, she should have noticed that something was wrong. The corner of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, and he praised. How smart. Good sister, what's your name? My name is Tapo Shangyun, and I'm the disciple of true devil Qian Tapo. The woman was bewildered by his actions though. When the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven meet the devils, they always shout at us angrily and never smile. How could you be one of them, calling me good sister the moment you meet me? If all of the people of Supreme Emperor Heaven were like you, I wouldn't have to kill so many divine arts practitioners. I'm actually curious, what is your background? Qin Mu opened his mouth to answer, but Tapo Shangyun stomped her feet that moment. The ground trembled, and flying swords instantly broke into the surface. Qin Mu's face changed slightly, and he raised his hand to grab them. All of the flying swords gathered in his palm and turned into a sword pellet that was about to land in his hand. While he was retrieving his sword, Tapo Shangyun rushed forward at a speed that was no slower than that of his flying swords. Before Qin Mu's sword pellet was even formed, spider legs appeared behind the woman's back and stabbed forward, scattering the sword pellet apart. The woman was incomparably smart, and her spider legs attacked like the storm, breaking the sword pellet to not give Qin Mu any chance. You're truly the weakest one, and I shall claim the first blood. Tapo Shangyun burst into soft laughter as 2 incomparably sharp bone spikes appeared in her hands. She stabbed them toward Qin Mu's chest. Just as she did so, she felt that something was wrong. She saw Qin Mu's smile becoming stiff and falling down into a pool of ink. But he was not the only one to change. Even the Li Fire and the Devil Fire behind him also turned into ink. Taepo Xiangyun hurriedly looked back and saw herself in a frame. Outside it, another Qin Mu was walking calmly toward her. Only then did she realize that she had entered a painting when she was pouncing at him. This is a painting? How could a drawing move and even speak? How did I not see any flaws? Taepo Xiangyun was astonished. She leaped up, wanting to jump out of the painting, but she remained trapped inside. Everything was blank besides the ink on the ground that was yet to dry. The woman hissed, and the 8 claws behind her back stabbed ruthlessly toward the outside. Chi chi chi. The spider legs pierced through the painting and Taepo Xiangyun was delighted. She wanted to tear apart the painting and jump out. Yet at this moment, Qin Mu blew a mouthful of air, and the painting fluttered away, landing in a wall of fire that was in that direction. In the thickly fire and devil fire, miserable shrieks could be heard as the painting burned into ashes. They formed the shape of a spider lady who was still struggling. In time she collapsed in the flames and there was no more movement. Sister Xiangyun, I would have liked it very much to have a fair fight with you, but there are too many experts and I have to save my stamina for stronger opponents, Qin Mu said apologetically. You are indeed very strong, but you are still not my opponent. Suddenly, the ground under Qin Mu's feet rose up and threw him high up. A giant's footprint appeared in the moving ground, and the moment Qin Mu was kicked up, incomparably sharp stone spikes shot out from the ground toward him. While he was in midair, his sword pellet came flying over and countless flying swords spiraled to shred all the stone spikes. When he was about to locate the enemy's position, the ground exploded once more, and a huge hand formed from magma grabbed at him. Qin Mu punched down. With a loud explosion, a huge volcano rose up and erupted. The power of the punch was instantly increased drastically. The punch and the huge hand collided, and the magma rocks instantly shattered. They flew in random directions and tumbled continuously to gather together once more to form a palm. It closed into a fist as devil fire burned in the places between the rocks. The magma giant from Heavenly Devil Horde? When Qin Mu was up, his arm was almost broken. He looked down only to see the ground trembling violently. A Heavenly Devil Horde transformed into the shape of magma to break out of the earth. When this person landed on the ground, he roared loudly, and Qin Mu's body that was in midair was struck by sound waves which had materialized. They pushed him into the wall of fire. Weakly, the magma giant sneered, thinking to leave, but suspicion bloomed in his heart, and he turned his head back. Up ahead, Qin Mu was floating in the wall of fire. However, he had now become a bull-headed mutant with a thick tail. This kind brother, could you finish saying that word before you leave? Qin Mu walked out of the wall of fire. The devil fire and Li fire flowed out from the wall with him and transformed into 2 fire dragons on which he stepped. Qin Mu's expression was cold. It's not weakly, but weakling. Fire element stars Mars Sovereign? The magma giant looked at him with doubt. Mars Sovereign can control fire, but only God fire. How did you control the devil fire? Do the humans really have such an intricate technique? That's not right. You're using the technique of the devil path. You're also a devil. He got more confused with each revelation. Qin Mu had transformed into a mutant with a bull's head and a human body. The form of Mars Sovereign clearly had a god's body, but devil flames were flowing out from him as he controlled the devil fire. On top of that, there were flowers of flame markings on Qin Mu that looked like fire burning, and one of the 2 fire dragons under his feet was a devil dragon. Only a devil could control such an intricate divine art. Beyond the sky, Saint Woodcutter and the Black Tiger God saw this sight, and the latter's eyes filled with suspicion. He asked in a low voice, "My lord, do you feel that?" Saint Woodcutter gently nodded. "I can feel it. Appearance is born from the heart while the devil is born from the heart. The devil appearance is born from his face." The Black Tiger God was puzzled. "But I clearly feel something weird is in his body. He seems partly a devil, not purely human." "My lord, you're lying again, right?" Saint Woodcutter frowned slightly and shouted at him. "When have I ever lied?" The Black Tiger God opened his mouth to speak, then shut it when he saw the gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven behind him. "I need to save some face for this old liar." Saint Woodcutter's gaze flickered, repeatedly returning to Qin Mu's body. His thoughts were unknown. He pulled back his gaze and turned to Fu Riluo on the other side. The devil god was also watching Qin Mu, seeming quite interested. Half-devil? His magic power is actually so powerful. A match for Sumo's disciple Shirquansong. He's using his magic power to supplement what he is lacking in strength and corporeal body. Fu Riluo smiled and said, Heavenly Master, your successor is an interesting youth, half-devil. Saint Woodcutter was astonished, but he said indifferently, What devil? He is a human who had merely cultivated a technique of the devil path. Who knows them better than me? Fu Riluo gave a gentle laugh and didn't speak anymore. The magma giant took in a long breath and his body expanded little by little as he rushed toward Qin Mu. You're still merely a weakling. Your corporeal body has yet to reach the level of a young true god. Even if you've cultivated the forms of the star sovereigns, you will still collapse in one blow. Qin Mu's vital qi was close to violent as the two dragons under his feet sprinted forward. The stars gathered together behind him while shining brightly. They formed a galaxy and each star was connected with the others with a trail of silver light. If one's gaze was clear enough, they would see that there were gods standing upright on each and every one of the stars. The starlight connecting them was the rays giving off by them. They weaved and formed a strange force field. It was the divine art that Li Tianqing had created after comprehending the unity technique of great educational, heavenly devil scriptures, great overarching heavenly stars palm force. In terms of divine arts, Qin Mu had never seen a more intricate one among those who were yet to become gods. The magma giant sneered, and his huge fist came toward Qin Mu. With a loud boom, mountain rocks crumbled and Qin Mu fell. Turning his body around, he rushed over once more. The magma giant roared furiously, and the devil flames on his body burned even fiercely. He suddenly took a step to rush at Qin Mu, and they collided once again. The twin dragons under Qin Mu's feet were squashed into pieces by the repelling force, and he fell back. Rocks flew off in all directions from the magma giant's body, but the next moment, trails of devil fire pulled them back. That devil fire that flowed through his limbs was like his blood, but also like his tendons. It was very strange. However, at this moment, a sword pellet flew over and merged into his magma body with the rocks. Swoosh! 8,000 swords exploded, slicing through the rocks and the devil fire. In a split second, they flowed through the whole body of the magma giant like river water and severed all his joints. The magma giant was stunned for a moment before collapsing to the ground. Qin Mu also crashed to himself, but he flipped himself up right away. Blood was leaking out from the corner of his lips, but he still rushed over frantically and danced in the sky with 8,000 swords. As he was running, he was also tapping furiously with his sword fingers. On the ground, countless rocks and devil fire were tumbling about to form two thick rock legs. They mixed with the devil fire to flow up and accumulate continuously. The waste was rapidly formed, and the body of the magma giant was about to be reconstructed. His life force was extremely strange. He was one of the few races that could reconstruct their bodies, sword-treading mountains and rivers. 8,000 swords instantly formed mountains and rivers of light. The moment the magma giant reconstructed himself to the neck, he was swallowed by the mountains and rivers and ended up as countless shattered rocks. Qin Mu sprinted over furiously, with his left hand as Yin and his right hand as Yang. He crossed them as he pressed down on the sword picture formed by sword-treading mountains and rivers. Yin-yang heavenly flipping hands, overlapping hands. The overlapping palm force of Yin and Yang exploded, and the chi of pure Yin and pure Yang merged with the sword picture. Yin lightning and Yang lightning exploded, sending the shattered rocks in all directions. Finally, the last butt of devil fire was extinguished. Qin Mu held onto his knees with both hands and spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm. He tilted his head and saw another devil expert walking out from the mountain to the side. He then grumbled angrily, "Another one? I've already fought 2 matches, so can't you find another person to fight?" The devil expert walked over with a slight smile. "Who told you to hammer your iron for no reason at all?" Qin Mu's face was black like iron. "You ran the slowest and even in the sky before landing here. Since you revealed your location like that, of course it attracted hunters." The devil expert looked warily at the shattered rocks on the ground, but his expression was quite relaxed. "On top of that, you look to be the easiest to bully among the group, so how could I not come? However, your abilities are somewhat out of my expectations." He looked at the shattered rocks on the ground and his pupils slightly contracted. He slowly released his aura bit by bit. You look easy to bully, but your abilities are extremely strong. Even though you don't have the aptitude of a true god, your abilities are already there. You're no weaker than Xu Yao, Huang Yu and the rest. I really wish I could know how many of your abilities are you still withholding after the battle between you and Shi Song. Is this peach easy for me to pluck? On the ground, flying swords gently floated up and Qin Mu straightened his back while taking in deep breaths. Suddenly, his breathing returned to normal and he smiled. Ever since I've become the Heavenly Devil Cult Master, no one has said that I look easy to bully. If you want to pluck this peach, why don't you try it for yourself? He'd been breathless moments ago, but now it was as if there was nothing wrong with him. The devil expert smiled slightly. Shi Chuansong's abilities are extremely powerful, to the point that even I needed to be somewhat wary of them. After a life-and-death fight with him, your injuries can't be light. You suppressed your breathing, but you can't hide your injuries. However, don't worry, if your abilities are strong enough to threaten me, I will turn and leave to find other people. He surveyed the surroundings and said leisurely, after all, there is still an unknown number of opponents hidden in this forest, so I have to preserve my strength to deal with them, right? His voice had a devilish ring to it, as though he was a kind neighboring brother who was really concerned about the other. However, Qin Mu's mind was still clear. He was the Heavenly Devil Cult Master. Even though he frequently called himself Heavenly Saint Cult Master, there were numerous great experts that were proficient in the Devil Path and Heavenly Devil Cult. Great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures were extremely strange and changed along with the heart. If there was devil nature in one's heart, great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures would hold devil techniques, and if God nature was in one's heart, they would be righteous. As Heavenly Devil Cult Master, Qin Mu wasn't at the level where he could be bluffed by the devil voice. He didn't believe even one word that the devil expert had said. Those words were for Qin Mu let his guard down. All that nonsense about turning to leave and having an unknown number of opponent hidden. If he believed it, he would die. Qin Mu stood still, not moving. 8,000 swords were strewn at random in the air and floated around him. They were waiting in the battle array of sword-treading mountains and rivers to unleash its power. The devil expert suddenly moved, rushing straight at Qin Mu. The energy which exploded from the corporeal body of this young true devil was terrifying. When Qin Mu's sword-treading mountains and rivers was released, he was ready to rush through them. Qin Mu shouted out, and sword-treading mountains and rivers still managed to trap his body. The devil expert then took out a huge flag and swept it toward the sword light. A huge chunk went missing from the picture of mountains and rivers. Formation expert. Qin Mu was astonished. The huge flag was stabbed into the ground where it spread open and revealed countless devil markings. They swirled around and an eye took shape. The devil expert fell back and jumped inside it, vanishing without a trace. The sword-treading mountains and river exploded, but it couldn't do anything to that devil flag. It was evident that the devil flag was an unusual treasure. Qin Mu was about to mobilize Carefree Sword to cut it apart when the devil expert appeared behind him. Qin Mu swung his sword there, but another huge flag appeared. The devil expert jumped into it to disappear again, causing his attack to miss. Only a huge flag was left in the ground. Soon there were 8 flags around Qin Mu. They spread out, and the end of each flag connected to another one, forming an octagonal formation that took up the area of a sports field. In the center of each flag, there was an open devil eye. Qin Mu frowned as trails of devil chi shot out from the devil eyes, bombarding him. Vital chi around his body rose and transformed into a huge bell that was there yet not there. Around the bell's wall, countless lightning markings coiled. He was using 5th ancestor human emperor's 5 thunder heaven-raising bell. Clang, clang, clang. Loud explosions rang out as Qin Mu struck outward from the inside of the bell, fighting with the trails of devil chi. 5 thunder heaven-raising bell was sometimes big and sometimes small, sometimes powerful and sometimes weak. In the meantime, the devil flag swirled continuously, and the devil chi from the devil eyes was sometimes thick and sometimes thin, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. This caused the bell to ring continuously and churn Qin Mu's chi and blood. He moved, and 5 thunder heaven-raising bell also moved with him. However, the devil flags outside also moved along with him. 5 Thunder Heaven-Raising Bell was 5th ancestor human emperor's ultimate art, which mixed corporeal body divine arts with lightning divine arts. 5 Lightning were the 5 big thunderclouds, and he used his strong corporeal body to execute them to form bell markings. Every punch and every kick would cause the 5 bolts of lightning to spread, and the bell would contract before expanding. The power of the 5 thunderclouds could increase by a lot, so it was the most suitable to destroy devil techniques. Yet now Qin Mu couldn't break it. He suddenly transformed into the form of Saturn's sovereign. Gate of Heaven influence appeared behind him and he spun around, sweeping it past the 8 huge flags. Soon though, it was shattered by the beams of the devil Qi. Gate of Heaven influence hadn't managed to force out the true form of the devil expert. Eyes awaken. Layers of formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes, and he looked around himself. Yet no matter in which direction he turned, he couldn't find the devil expert. He could only see figures moving quickly through the flags as though they were phantoms. Within the formation, the huge bell that was struck by the devil Qi didn't completely disperse it. Instead, they moved in fine lines that could be seen by the naked eye. Those lines were laid in the space and sliced it into numerous chunks. Each cubic space had runes of the devil path continuously forming inside. The devil was a formation expert. The attack earlier had been a diversion while his true goal was to trap Qin Mu in his killing formation and purifying him. In this way, he could preserve his strength to deal with other people. He was planning to use the smallest amount of energy possible to get rid of Qin Mu. The human youth's magic power far surpassed that of his peers, and his divine arts were overbearing and fierce. There were many people that could force him to guard, but only a few strong practitioners like First Ancestor Human Emperor and Village Chief could be able to suppress him on the same realm. However, the devil expert he now faced was also one of them. First Ancestor and Village Chief were experts that had entered the path, so it was not surprising for them to be able to that. However, the devil expert was of the younger generation. From just this point, it could be seen how profound were his formation attainments. Formation skill? Qin Mu suddenly dispersed 5 Thunder Heaven-Raising Bell, and stretched his hand to grab his sword pellet with a tight grip. Fine flying swords flowed out like water and transformed into a huge spear. If anyone was to look at it in detail, they would see that it was constructed from countless fine flying swords which were moving non-stop. Every sword was executing spiral sword form, and the tip of the spear was carefree sword that was incomparably sharp. At the same time, runes appeared around Qin Mu's body. They weren't powerful divine arts markings but symbols of algebra and mathematics, Taiji diagram, Wuji diagram, sun and moon runes, 5 elements runes, 6 directions arrays, 8 trigrams arrays, 64 hexagrams. They were changing continuously, constructing a kind of system that calculated the isometric space. The runes changed irregularly, calculating the formation structure that was formed by the 8 devil flags. Countless runes bounced around, and the calculation speed was dazzling to behold. Qin M focused his vision, and his body moved with the spear. It flew out like a dragon covered in silver light. Every beam of devil Qi hit by it was shattered. Suddenly, the 8 flags swayed and were taken back. The formation of the devil expert was broken, and his true form was revealed. He swept up the flags and immediately left. He laughed and said, "It's rare to meet an expert skilled in calculations. Your abilities are very strong, farewell." The flag covered him, and he instantly vanished. Qin Mu stabbed the huge spear in the ground, his spirit unrivaled. He didn't relax at all. After a moment though, his aura suddenly weakened and he coughed up blood. He gasped for breath and sat down on his butt. At that moment, the devil expert appeared behind him like a phantom and stabbed his huge flag which like a spear at Qin Mu. He laughed again. "You truly have no more strength left, so I'm back again." A strange smile appeared on Qin Mu's face. He was sitting with his back toward the devil youth as the huge spear in his hand separated into 2 huge knives. Holding one of them properly and the other in reverse, he hid one behind his back to block the huge flag that came straight for his heart. The other knife was hidden in front of his chest. Qin Mu spun around and slashed with a huge knife which he'd held at the front at the huge flag. The devil expert was astonished, and the flag in his hand swayed until both of his arms went numb. "Do you know the sure kill technique of the battle technique school?" Both of them were leaning forward, and Qin Mu spoke into his opponent's ear. His feet were off the ground, but he was still sitting, as though that devil's move had turned him around like a spinner. This was a trick that Butcher had frequently played on Qin Mu when he had no legs. It was used to test his move, raising the knife from forbidden. It was the most dangerous move among Butcher's knife skills. The devil expert moved irregularly and his body shifted like a phantom, but he could never shake Qin Mu off. His speed was indeed faster, but Qin Mu stuck to his back as though their bodies were glued together. The devil expert's figure transformed continuously, and his body movements were truly strange and unpredictable. In time he managed to shake off Qin Mu and was delighted. He could finally deal with him face to face. At this moment, Qin Mu's voice came from beside his ears. "What's your name?" "My name is..." Knife light shone and Qin Mu raised his blade with a reverse grip. The devil expert couldn't even finish his answer before the power of this move burst forth. "Sorry, I didn't let you finish speaking." Qin Mu put away his knives. They flowed down from his hands like quicksand, changing into a sword pellet. The devil expert's belly was sliced open, and his corporeal body collapsed on the ground. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath and shook his head. "Another expert and I will be dead." He tilted his head to listen, but there was no noise in the mountains surrounding him. After a moment he repeatedly weakly, "Another expert and I will be dead." The majestic mountains in the surroundings still had no movement. "Work." Qin Mu opened his mouth and spat out blood before collapsing onto the ground. He twitched twice and gave a kick with his leg before taking his last breath. The surrounding mountains were still silent, without any movement at all. Qin Mu's face turned green and his body grew stiff. His blood and flesh hardened, but there was still no movement in the surroundings. After a moment, Qin Mu got up and went back to the wall of fire to forge his flying swords without a change in expression. A female devil on a mountaintop raised her head and watched the youth from above. She then suddenly turned around and left without any hesitation. "The forging brat is even more devilish than me. I can't provoke him." At that moment, Huang Yu stopped and raised his head to look at the mountain top. There was a person carrying a long knife standing upright there. "Shahuali." The cloud vapor above Huang Yu's head steamed. The vision formed from his primordial spirit breathing vital qi in and out. At this moment, his gaze landed on the person on the mountain and the vapor cloud grew. It gained an area of half a field. The vital qi in the vapor cloud condensed into droplets of rainwater that could be faintly seen falling to the ground. When they landed on the young man's head, they evaporated and went back up into the vapor cloud again. This looped over and over again. The mountain had been raised by Saint Woodcutter and Fu Riluo's vital qi runes and not made by true creation, so it wasn't too high. Huang Yu scaled it, coming to the mountaintop in a few steps before stopping when he was still over 100 yards away from Shahuali. "When I met you in the battlefield, I almost died at your hands." Huang Yu's aura rose dramatically, and his fighting spirit overflowed. Even if he was defeated before, he wasn't the least bit afraid. Instead, his boundless fighting spirit was ignited. He was a battle maniac and had no fear. "I've always been searching for you to take revenge for my loss." Huang Yu was excited. "May senior brother give me this chance." Shahuali turned around and his gaze fell on him. The devil eye on the handle of the demon knife behind his back didn't open, however. His right foot suddenly shifted, and the tip of his foot pointed diagonally. His feet weren't lined up as he pointed his left foot at Huang Yu, and his right foot at another woman that was scaling up the mountain. She appeared in front of them the next moment. Huang Yu's expression sunk and he said coldly, "Chan Yuan, don't interfere with my matter. Otherwise I will kill you as well." Chan Yuan was also a divine arts practitioner of Supreme Emperor Heaven. Huang Yu and the rest had first rushed toward the place where the axe and spear crossed when they had entered the sand table world. However, when everyone was heading there, the place lost its meaning, so they had all entered hiding. The only one who didn't hide was Qin Mu. He had sprinted furiously through midair, and because of his great speed, he'd left a trail of clouds all the way to the border of the sand table world, guiding the others toward him. Next, Qin Mu hadn't bothered to hide and began hammering iron, luring numerous devil experts into trying to hunt him down. With the devil experts busy, the experts of Supreme Emperor Heaven had the rare chance to hunt the devil experts that were on the route. Chan Yuan had noticed this and had stayed guard on the route that had to be taken to get to Qin Mu. She discovered Zhehuali, who was standing on the mountain top, and also seen Huang Yu. In delight, she scaled up the mountain, planning to work with Huang Yu, the rank 3 strong practitioner, to get rid of the devil expert. Senior brother Huang Yu, you and senior sister Yu, he are both disciples of true God Peng Yu. So you should know that the general situation is more important. Chan Yuan stared at Zhehuali with a grim expression. She then added solemnly, "This duel isn't just about your personal grudge, nor is it a chance for you to chase the extremes of your paths, skills, and divine arts. It concerns the ownership of Li City and the fate of our Supreme Emperor Heaven. No matter if it's me or you, it will be hard for either of us to deal with this person, but together we can take him down. I won't work together with you, so fall back." Huang Yi had a firm expression and shook his head. "Seeing that we are both divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven, I won't kill you. However, if you take the chance to kill senior brother Zhehuali while we are fighting, don't blame me for being ruthless." His gaze was firm when he looked at Zhehuali. His desire to seek Tao was incomparably intense, and he chuckled. "If I'm victorious, he will die at my hands. If I'm defeated, he will also be heavily injured. You can take the chance to make your move then and not play with the fate of Li City. You just have to watch. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." Chan Yuan frowned slightly, but she took a step back. Huang Yu became excited and his aura became even more intense. "Zhehuali, please guide me. You aren't my opponent. The so-called young true gods of your Supreme Emperor Heaven are merely a joke in my eyes." Zhehuali's expression was indifferent. "You guys don't know the true meaning of being a true god. You think you're destined to be one just because your corporeal body reaches the level of a young true god. You have no idea that you are still far off. There are 3 things that make a young true god. And those are the corporeal body, primordial spirit, and path. You guys have only achieved one, but I'm different." The demon knife on his back trembled gently and hummed. He said leisurely, "Before I came down to the lower bound, I have already achieved 2, with only my path still lacking. My descent to pay respect to Fu Riluo as my master is my cultivation in seeking my Tao. Huang Yu, you are obsessed with the paths, skills, and divine arts, so you are about to achieve the second requirement. I admire this determination of yours, so come together. Don't lose your life for nothing. Don't look down on me nor my paths, skills, and divine arts. Without destruction, there can be no creation. One can only become stronger when encountering someone stronger. Army vanquishing mountain." Huang Yu howled and sprinted forward furiously. As he did so, his attack was unleashed, and his fist skill transformed into a divine art. In that instant, countless apparitions of fists appeared and accumulated into a mountain. The next moment, they were like an army vanquishing star. His fists were so heavy that the wind from them could compress the air and send waves of explosions as though thunder was rumbling. This move from Huang Yu showed his astonishing attainments in fist skills. When he had fought with Zhehuali on the battlefield, he had realized his inadequateness, and when he met Zhehuali now, under the pressure of a strong enemy, he was actually able to improve by another step. His divine art army vanquishing mountain was about to reach perfection. Behind Zhehuali's back, the demon knife suddenly opened its eye and swirled, expanding while turning the color of blood. Zhehuali stretched his hand to pull out his knife and slashed at army vanquishing mountain. Instantly, knife light burst forth and collided with the fist apparitions. The knife light ricocheted and seemed to transform into 10,000 knife lights in an instant, forming a knife mountain that broke army vanquishing mountain. 10,000 knife lights suddenly merged. The one then came for Huang Yu's head. He clasped his hands to grab it, but the demon knife suddenly split into 2 and Huang Yu's expression changed slightly. Flesh grew under his armpits and 2 arms clasped the second knife light. Before he could even let out a sigh of relief though, the 2 demon knives separated into 4. Huang Yu shouted angrily and more flesh wriggled under his armpits. 4 more arms grew out to grab the knife lights that were slashing toward him. Then, he looked in despair as the 4 knife lights separated into 8 to slash him. Chi 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 chi. The new knife lights slashed down, and Huang Yu lowered his head, looking those that had vanished into the ground. 4 long and straight wounds appeared on his face, growing longer and larger. Zhehuali shook his demon knife and gently sheathed it on his back while Huang Yu split into several pieces. He then looked at Chan Yuan, who had a grim expression and was slowly moving back. "Go, I don't kill a woman," Shahuali said indifferently. Chan Yuan still didn't relax and continued to move back calmly. When she was a mile away, she turned and ran furiously for her life. At that moment, Shahuali's muscles tensed up, and he sprinted forward with all his strength. With a loud explosion, he surpassed the speed of sound and pulled out his knife with both hands to slash straight down. The knife instantly reached Chan Yuan's back. She turned in the air, throwing out her sword pellet, which expanded outwards. Before the flying swords could even shoot out, the knife cut her from the top of her head. Shahuali stopped and put away his knife, turning to leave. "I need to have the man from the painting see my master's knife skills, so I cannot be injured and had to slay you from the back." With a calm expression, he tilted his head to listen for the source of the hammer. "Woman, the instant you turned around, your flaw was the biggest. Never show your back in front of me." Behind him, Chan Yuan fell down. On the other side, mountains crumbled as two figures were fighting fiercely among them. Mountains with blade-like precipices were pierced through and shattered into ruins, vanishing into the air. The battle ended very quickly, and Yuhi touched the wound on her face. Her opponent had died, but he had still injured her. She raised her head and looked at the knife light which flashed and disappeared in the sky, then knitted her eyebrows. "Shahuali, you and the blacksmith are equally showy, but I don't have absolute confidence that I can defeat you." She turned to leave. "I need to find junior brothers and sisters before eliminating you." The sand table world was vast, making it hard to find other people. There were battles erupting at several mountains. The divine arts practitioners met the experts of the devil race, and they naturally used all of their strength to slay their opponents. That was why after any two people from opposing sides met, the battle would usually end in a short while. The divine arts practitioners would end up either dead or crippled, making the situation quite grim. However, even if it was just for a short while, it was enough time for them to fight over a dozen miles. Everywhere they passed, mountains were cut and even crumbled. The destruction they caused was quite a sight. There were even some who used huge divine arts to destroy an area of 100 miles, which was terrifying. Of course, this was the sand table world and not the real world. If it was the world outside, even though the divine arts practitioners on Seven Stars Realm weren't weak, they didn't have such destructive force. The place where the axe and spear crossed was one of tranquility. Sanghua set up her trap excitedly and lay in ambush. She quietly waited for enemies to fall into her sure death trap. Time passed by slowly. After 2 hours, the young girl popped her head out from her hiding place with her 2 long braids hanging down. Another 2 hours passed, and Sanghua sat down on the head of the axe. Her palm supported her chin while she swayed her legs in utter boredom. Another 2 hours passed, and Sanghua lay down on the axe. She looked at the sky while wondering, "Where is everybody?" She suddenly sat up, a little crazed. Where have they all went? Isn't this place where everyone was sure to fight? No matter if it's friend or foe, someone just come here. Outside the sand table world, the gods and devils looked at the battle inside with both delight and anxiousness. It hadn't been long, but plenty of battles had already been fought. When Qin Mu had killed 3 devils and lay down on the ground as a corpse to lure the 4th opponent, most of the devil gods couldn't help becoming nervous. They were all breaking out in cold sweat for the female devil that was hiding in the mountain top nearby. Luckily, she wasn't tricked and just turned to leave. Most of the devil gods let out sighs of relief then. "My lord, he is truly your successor," the black tiger god stated with excitement. Saint Woodcutter was expressionless while Fu Rilyuo smiled. Their gazes met before shifting away. When everyone saw Zhehuali slaying the 2 young experts, Huang Yu and Chan Yuan with 2 knives, most of the gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven couldn't help breaking out in cold sweat. They were truly worried for the other divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven. However, the most worried one was still Sanghua's father, God Sang Yi. He gripped his fists tightly, his palms all sweaty. "Good daughter, don't come out, just stay there obediently." God Sang Yi stared intensely at the place where the axe and spear crossed, and saw Sanghua jumping down from the axe. His expression couldn't help changing and he chanted to himself, "Don't go out, don't ever go out." Sanghua ran out. "Don't meet an enemy. Don't meet an enemy." A female devil was heading over straight for her. God Sangyi nearly fainted. She's going to die. Suddenly, Sanghua seemed to feel something and stopped in her footsteps. The female devil in front also felt danger and immediately stopped. With not high but precipitous mountains separating them, they executed their divine arts. It happened nearly at the same time, each of them imprinting on the mountain in front of them. The violent divine arts of the two women collided, and after a moment of silence, the mountain crumbled and dust rose into the sky like fog. Within it, rune markings began to disintegrate and turned into spots of bright light, as though they were exploding fireworks. The two women couldn't see each other, and their sword and knife pellets flew out of their sleeves to circle around their beautiful bodies. The fine flying swords and curved knives fluttered around their clothing like fireflies dancing in the sky. Sanghua had learned from her father, God Sangyi, so what she knew was sword skills. The female devil on the other side was Devil Knife Fuluotua's disciple, so she cultivated knife skills. They touched each other at the same instant, and they were like two butterflies flying around each other as their pellets spun. Incomparably fine knives and swords clashed, and sparks burst out. God Sangye's sword skills, you are Sanghua. Devil Knife Fuluotua's knife skills, you are Bai Yi. The two girls immediately recognized each other's skills. Among the knife lights and sword shadows, the two graceful girls unleashed their divine arts at close range. A knife light penetrated through divine arts, and the sword light swept past hair. The bright light given off by the rolling pellets lit up their eyes and shone on their bodies. Even though their corporeal bodies looked delicate, they possessed energy that even surpassed that of Qin Mu. When they saw each other, their bodies had already reacted before they could even form thoughts. With their palms, elbows, shoulders, legs, and knees, they attacked their opponent like a raging storm. The two girls grunted and suffered from the other's moves, falling out of the fireworks. They rolled down the mountain like tattered sacks and only stopped after some 6-7 miles. When they were about to stop rolling, the sword pellet and knife pellets that they had used to attack each other had come to their heads. The swords and knives rained down, and in an instant hundreds of curved knives and flying swords poured down. The two girls tumbled and flipped. Sanghua took down the bough on her back and rolled around like a leopard cat. With every tumble, there would be over a dozen arrows shooting out. In the meantime, 13 miles on the other side, Bai Yi had also taken out her devil bow to attack back. Behind them, the knife and sword lights were still clashing. The two girls went around a mountain and fought across it. The vibration of the bowstrings created crisp sounds as the mountain was pierced, gaining numerous holes. As the two were sprinting at high speed to avoid each other's arrows, swords, and knives, Sanghua suddenly saw the huge axe and spear. They had actually gone back to the place where the two large weapons crossed. One of the girls sprinted up the huge axe while the other jumped onto the black spear. They moved like snakes while attacking each other. When they finally fought to the peak of the two divine weapons, the two girls suddenly fell like shooting stars after executing all kinds of moves in midair. Sanghua hurriedly took a look and saw Bai Yi falling into the trap she had laid earlier. She then immediately activated the sword pellet formation she had set up. Ah! As the only child of God Sangyi, Sanghua could have anything she wanted. Even though she couldn't refine a sword pellet like Qin Mu, she felt no lack of sword pellets. She had placed 7 of them in her 7-star sword diagram. The divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven were too lazy to cultivate algebra, so they used the simplest method, and that was to copy the sword diagrams that the ancestors had left behind. By refining treasure according to the methods left behind, the time they saved could be used on cultivation. 7-star sword diagram was one such formation. 7-star sword picture wasn't very complicated, and many divine arts practitioners just copied the sword diagrams. Their power wasn't great, but with 7 sword pellets it would be no small matter. In a life and death struggle, even if it was a short while in which one was hindered, it was enough to determine their fate. There was nothing then that needed to be said about falling into a trap. Sanghua acted without thinking. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The curved bow shot numerous arrow lights into the sword diagrams. Bai Yi blocked left and right, defending hard against the attacks, but the next moment, the sword pellet from Sanghua's hand flew out and the flying swords formed a line. The first one stabbed through the devil's heart of the brows, then the second followed right after, and so did the others. A few hundred swords flew out one after another from the back of her head. Bai Yi's body turned stiff as she was swallowed by the countless swords bursting forth from the 7 stars sword diagram. I won. Donghua was stunned, and her confidence gained a huge boost. She put away her 7-star sword picture and her sword pellets, leaving the place where the axe and spear crossed to continue searching for opponents. Outside the sand table world, God Sangye's sweat was falling like rain. He was a god and was experienced, so he naturally knew that his daughter had won by luck. Donghua might have experienced the massacre and been training diligently for a long time while experiencing numerous struggles of life and death, but she was still inferior compared to Bai Yi, this devil expert that had been in hundreds of battles. Her experience was a drop in the ocean in comparison. Defeating Bai Yi was a fortunate event, but she couldn't win by luck every time. If she encountered other devil experts, wouldn't his last kin be killed in front of him? Suddenly, God Sangye went still, stunned as he surveyed the sand table world. Within it, another few battles had ended, and the number of devil experts had been reduced significantly. Only 2 people were left: Fu Riluo's disciple Zhehuali and True Devil Sumo's other disciple Jiang Yi. The young experts of Supreme Emperor Heaven were left with Qin Mu, Yu He, Donghua, and Xu Yao. Yu He had found Xu Yao, and the 2 of them worked together to kill strong practitioners with the advantage of numbers. Of course, most of the enemies were still killed by Qin Mu, the grain thresher. It was because he had killed 3 devil experts in a row that the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven were able to hold an advantage. Jiang Yi's abilities were extremely high, but his injuries were quite serious after fighting head-on with the opponent, so his remaining battle power wasn't too high. Maybe this would be enough for Donghua's survival. However, Yu He and Xu Yao also seemed to be injured. God Sangye's heart shook again. He watched as his daughter ran in the direction of the forging brat. Meanwhile, at the border of the sand table world, Zhehuali carried a demon knife like an ascetic monk, walking forward step by step. He didn't use any divine art, so his speed wasn't fast. His footsteps seemed to have been measured accurately by a ruler, and every step he took was exactly a foot long. The length of each one was exactly the same, not an inch longer or an inch shorter. This was the rule of his knife skills. The experts of the devil race were usually open, and their moves were flashy and big, unbothered by trifles. They would burst forth with astonishing battle power without warning. But Zhehuali had learned from divine knife Luo Wushuang, an existence that was a knife god. Luo Wushuang's knife skills were proficient in calculations and had awe-inspiring practices. The position, strength, footwork, body motions, and even muscle movement was measured extremely strictly. There was no room for any error. Vital qi circulation at a deeper level, the mobilization of the primordial spirit, the intention, the essence all had to fulfill the requirements too. Zhehuali had grown up under such teachings, so he was different from the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven. To learn Luo Wushuang's knife skills, he needed to be skilled in calculations. On top of that, he needed extremely high attainments in them. Even though he had come down to Supreme Emperor Heaven under orders and become a disciple to Fu Riluo, he didn't learn the unrestrained heroism from his new master. He was still using the rules he had learned from Luo Wushuang to restrain his words and actions, acting prim and proper at all times. He came to the wall of fire of the sand table world and raised his head. Qin Mu's back was facing him. The youth raised a sword to examine his craft in the light of the flame. In contrast to Zhehuali's cautiousness, the youth had the same unrestrained heroism as Fu Riluo. His figure when raising his sword had a kind of heroic bearing. Admiring a sword in front of the fire was a heroic emotion one couldn't learn. Zhehuali's heart couldn't help but beat slightly faster. However, he swiftly calmed his mind down. At that moment, the youth with the sword seemed to have heard the speed of his heartbeat changing, for he lowered his head and glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. However, Zhehuali soon realized that the youth wasn't looking at him from the corner of his eyes. Instead, he was looking at his sword and using the mirror-like surface to see what was happening behind him. The reason he made it seem like he was looking at me from the corner of his eyes was to throw off my judgment. If I took the chance to make a move, my judgment would have been wrong and he would have gained the upper hand. Zhehuali raised his eyebrows slightly. If experts like them were to make a wrong judgment from a minute movement of the enemy's body, the enemy would not let go of it. Sometimes victory or defeat came from the simplest of errors. He's so experienced that it doesn't fit his age. Shahuali took in a deep breath and pushed his shoulders back. It was this young man that his master divine knife couldn't forget. He was someone to whom he even had to show his knife skills. Shahuali suddenly bowed to Qin Mu and said solemnly, "My master is Luo Wushuang." Qin Mu turned around and placed the sword in his hand on the smelting table. "I know, I remember him." Shahuali didn't get up and continued to say, "My master said that if I meet you, I need to ask you to see the knife skills he had founded." When he bowed, the demon eye on the demon knife behind his back suddenly opened, and bloody vertical pupils swirled around. Its gaze was on the young man. Qin Mu smiled and placed his palm on the smelting table. Flying swords flowed to him like fine sand and gathered under his palm, forming a perfect circular ball that was the size of a thumb. "I would also like to see his knife skills very much." Qin Mu held the sword pellet in his hand and said, "You'll be executing his knife skills on behalf of him, so you greeted me. But it was because you respect him and not because you respect me, isn't that right?" Shahuali straightened his back and nodded. Qin Mu smiled lightly. "He executes his knife with one arm. So have you learned his knife skills with one arm too, or two arms?" Shahuali's pupils contracted. Qin Mu didn't miss any minute changes in his expression and noticed his reaction. The smile on his face grew wider. "Shahuali, you can execute his knife skills to show me." Shahuali instantly felt an invisible pressure pressing down on his Dao heart. Qin Mu had asked him if he mastered one arm or two arms, and this had given his Dao heart immense pressure. This was because Luo Wushuang was one-armed divine knife. If he mastered the skills with one arm, it meant that his other arm would end up useless. If he didn't use that arm in battle, no matter what divine arts he executed, they would never be perfectly matched with his knife skills. In this case, he would have a large flaw. If he had mastered the skills with two arms, it would mean that he had not learned Luo Wushuang's one-armed divine knife. Executing Luo Wushuang's knife skills with two arms would mean that he could never execute them perfectly, that he would not master their essence. Other than to fulfill Luo Wushuang's wish, Shahuali had come down to the lower bound to find a method to perfect his knife skills from Fu Riluo. It was to patch his inadequateness through experience and battle, to advance another step closer to becoming a young true god in paths, skills, and divine arts. And now, at the first face-off, he was completely seen through by his opponent. No matter if he were to execute his knife or not, it was impossible for him to stop halfway. Outside the sand table world, Saint Woodcutter's eyes lit up and he took a glance at the black tiger god beside him and said solemnly, "His frame of mind is clearly ridiculously strong," pressuring Shahuali the moment they met. "So why did you say his frame of mind was weak?" The black tiger god covered his ears and whimpered in grievance. "His frame of mind is really very weak. His expressions keep changing drastically." "That's right, my lord. Didn't you also say he had a bouncy temper, and that the cultivation of his frame of mind was too weak?" Saint Woodcutter's expression didn't change. "I didn't. Don't speak nonsense. You have heard wrong." The black tiger god pouted, and a vein popped out on Saint Woodcutter's forehead. The black tiger god then immediately looked down and laughed. It was this little tiger who had heard wrong. Saint Woodcutter took advantage of the chance to get off the hook and preserve his face. However, Shahuali was riding on the tiger's back and unable to get off the hook. Cold sweat broke out on the young man's forehead, and he looked at his right arm. Luo Wushuang didn't have it and wielded his knife with his left, so the marvel of his skills relied on that. If Shahuali wanted to execute Luo Wushuang's knife skills without any flaw, he would have to cut off his right arm. More and more cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He was indignant. Before he could exchange blows with Qin Mu, he had to sever one of his arms? Who could tolerate that? Who could be willing? However, if he didn't cut off his right hand, his knife skills wouldn't be as perfect as those of his master Luo Wushuang. And he didn't feel well executing an imperfect knife skill in front of Qin Mu. The frame of mind doesn't affect the abilities as much as you think. Suddenly, a voice came from the back and startled Shahuali, who was in a dilemma. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and looked at the Azura. He had been forging lately, so he didn't recognize Zhang Yi. The young man was covered in blood, but it was hard to say whether it was his or his opponent's. However, from the looks of it, his injuries were not light. He was a randomly sliced fish with hundreds of wounds of all sizes that had been scalded by hot water on top of that. Yet even with all those extremely heavy injuries, his fighting spirit was still blazing and his aura was dense. His blood and chi soared into the sky, and the moment he walked over, the scent of blood and rotting corpses assaulted Qin Mu's nostrils. It was as if he had brought along a sea of corpses. Zhang Yi's gaze shifted away from Zhehuali and landed on Qin Mu. The frame of mind isn't part of one's abilities. They are born from the corporeal body, primordial spirit, path, skills, and divine arts. The frame of mind has little to no effect on one's abilities. The onlooker sees clear. Zhehuali, you've fallen into his trap. Aren't you going to jump out? Zhehuali's eyes lit up, and his breathing calmed down. Zhang Yi was one of his rare good friends in Supreme Emperor Heaven, and the two of them frequently exchanged what they had learned. They were bosom buddies and had sworn to live and die together. On the battlefield, Zhang Yi had saved his life before, and he had also saved Zhang Yi's life. What affect abilities the most are the corporeal body, primordial spirit, paths, skills, and divine arts. Zhehuali, your corporeal body and mine are both stronger than his. Your primordial spirit is stronger than mine, so it's also naturally stronger than his. As for paths, skills, and divine arts, your knife skills have been learned from divine knife Luo Wushuang, and you learned the devil technique of true devil Fu Riluo. You are skilled in both sides, so could your paths, skills, and divine arts be weaker? He hasn't even succeeded in cultivating the body of a true god, so how high could his abilities be? Zhehuali's confidence suddenly returned, and his mind relaxed. He smiled and said, sometimes a divine arts practitioner needs to have a good teacher and a helpful friend. Zhang Yi, you're my helpful friend. After hearing Zhang Yi's words, he finally regained his confidence and his frame of mind subconsciously returned back to its peak. His abilities had increased by a lot once. He had acquired the corporeal body and the primordial spirit of a young true god. Even though his knife skills hadn't reached the extent of path, he wasn't afraid of anyone within the sand table world in terms of abilities. His advantage was his corporeal body of a young true god, and on this point, he certainly surpassed Qin Mu. This would give him an advantage in speed, strength, reaction, and power. The second advantage was his own primordial spirit, which was as strong as that of a young true god. Even though a divine arts practitioner of 7 stars realm couldn't bring out their primordial spirit's full power, its proper usage was often the thing that led to victory. Zhehuali had 2 masters, Luo Wushuang and Fu Riluo. The latter was a devil word and it meant Vajra. Fu Riluo's primordial spirit was extremely powerful, and he had learned some techniques for it to improve to another step. Based on that, he was certain that Qin Mu wouldn't be a match for him. The third advantage was his knife skills and the demon knife. It was his spirit weapon which was personally forged for him by Luo Wushuang. His knife skills were also taught by him, and for them to reach their extremes, his master had worked for close to 40,000 years. His weakness was his frame of mind, however, but it didn't affect his abilities by much. His frame of mind being inferior to that of Qin Mu would never be the deciding factor in victory or defeat between them. Zhang Yi smiled happy. Your abilities are even above mine. It's just that you were affected by his words after subconsciously falling into his trap. Zhehuali also smiled. With such a friend, what more could he ask for? What concerned such a sworn buddy? One was enough. Qin Mu frowned slightly. Zhehuali alone had already made him feel uneasy, but now even Zhang Yi had come. He truly had no odds for success. Suddenly, Sanghua popped her head out, her braids swinging beneath it. She then waved excitedly at him. The one who threshes grains. No worries, I'm here. Is there only us here? Where's senior sister Yu He, senior brother Xu Yao, and senior brother Huang Yu? Have they died in battle? Once she spoke, Yu He walked out with an expression of helplessness. Xu Yao also frowned and followed out behind her. Senior sister Yu He, senior brother Xu Yao, what were you hiding in the mountain for? We have 4 people, so it's more than enough to deal with the 2 of them. Senior brother Huang Yu? Is he also hiding in the mountain with you guys? Yu He's expression became even more helpless, and Xu Yao's eyebrows scrunched up even tighter. The 2 of them had hidden in the dark, ready to assassinate Zhang Yi and Zhehuali. However, once they were called out by the girl, they had no choice but to walk out. This made them seem as people who were not just and honorable. I had long discovered you too, since you couldn't hide the murderous intent in your hearts. As for Huang Yu, I've slain him with my knife, Shahuali said indifferently. Junior sister Sanghua, we just saw junior brother Huang Yu's corpse. As for other people, they are also all dead. Only we are left. They died a glorious death after fighting so many devils. They sacrificed themselves to bring the devils down with them, because of which we now have the numbers advantage, Yuhi said. She felt quite helpless when thinking about God Sang Ye's little daughter. Sanghua had actually pointed out their hiding spot and rendered their plans completely useless. On top of that, even though they looked like they outnumbered the enemies, it wasn't of much use. Sanghua's abilities were low, and she hadn't even passed the test of God Suppression Pagoda. Without the aptitude of a true god, she was completely useless. Yuhi was almost certain that Sanghua had hidden after entering the battlefield. This pure maiden had never met an enemy, which was why she was able to live for this long. Qin Mu was also a youth who only knew how to forge. He acted rashly and kept forging by himself before they entered the sand table world. He didn't communicate with his peers or even observe the enemies. The reason why Qin Mu had survived was most likely because he was a lucky bastard like Sanghua as well. The devil experts that had come to kill him probably got intercepted by the young experts of Supreme Emperor Heaven on the journey. They fought to the death, and as a result, the forging youth was able to live. In Yuhi's heart, even with Qin Mu and Sanghua, it was no different from having no assistance. To defeat Shahuali and Jiang Yi, she could only rely on Xu Yao. Hope these two nitwits won't create any trouble, she thought secretly to herself. It was just that with only her and Xu Yao, she was not confident that they could defeat Shahuali and Jiang Yi. Xu Yao looked at Qin Mu frowning. He smiled warmly. Senior brother Qin who threshes the grains, you aren't forging anymore? Qin Mu smiled to the two of them to acknowledge them, and the smile on Yuhi's face vanished. Xu Yao also pretended not to see anything. On the other hand, Sanghua rushed over excitedly and asked, "Are your swords done?" Qin Mu nodded and smiled warmly at her. "Sister Hua, the swords are done." Her eyes lit up. "How's the power?" "Just now, Shahuali said that his master asked him to execute his knife skills for me to see, so I still haven't had the time to test out my swords. I don't know what's their power like." The two of them then whispered about how to test the swords. Yuhi knew she was facing her greatest enemies yet and tried her best to stabilize her mind, to not listen to what they were saying. Her gaze landed on Jiang Yi and Shahuali, and she said in a low voice, "Junior brother Xu Yao, you shall deal with Jiang Yi while I will face Shahuali. I don't think I can defeat him, but Jiang Yi's injuries are heavier, so quickly get rid of him and come to assist me." Xu Yao took in a long breath and said solemnly, "Senior sister, don't worry, leave Jiang Yi to me." Shahuali's gaze flickered and he said in a low voice, "Senior brother Jiang Yi, do you choose the strong or the weak one? Using the weak to stop the strong and using the strong to attack the weak. This is the art of war." Jiang Yi laughed, and his heroism rushed into the clouds. "I will stop the strong and you will kill the weak. Later, we brothers can work together to achieve victory." Shahuali had a sorrowful expression. "Your injuries are very heavy, you might die. Don't underestimate me. I learned from true devil Suemo, and have yet to execute my heavenly devil sacrifice." Jiang Yi laughed loudly. "Don't worry, I will live." He strode toward Qin Mu. Yuhi and Xu Yao were stunned. Jiang Yi had clearly said he would be stopping the strong and let Shahuali kill the weak, so why was he walking toward Qin Mu? Could the devil have gone crazy and thought that Qin Mu was strong while they were weak? Be careful of tricks, Yuhi whispered under her breath. Xu Yao nodded and looked at Shahuali, who was walking over. On the other side, Qin Mu looked at Jiang Yi and frowned slightly. "Sister Hua, wait a moment. Let me test my swords." Sanghua took a step back, and Qin Mu tapped a finger on the heart of his brows. The sword pellet floated up, coming near his forehead. Suddenly, Fu Riluo's voice came from outer space and echoed throughout the sand table world. "We have lost. Give up Li City, hold your hands." No matter if it was inside or outside the sand table world, everyone was stunned. Even the gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven couldn't help becoming surprised and delighted. Jiang Yi's expression filled with disbelief, and he raised his head to shout, "I haven't died yet, so why do you say we have lost? Fu Riluo, I won't accept your orders." In outer space, Fu Riluo's huge face covered the sky and looked down at him coldly. "Brat, you don't know what's good for you. Suemo, put your disciple in place and make him quickly admit defeat so he can come out. True Devil Suemo frowned and said, Zhang Yi, it's considered that we have lost this round. Admit defeat with Shahuali. Zhang Yi couldn't contain his anger and shouted out. So many brothers have died to take Li City, and you are making me leave like this? Master, you might be willing to, but I'm not. Suemo was helpless and said to Fu Riluo, Senior brother, I know your wisdom is unparalleled, but it wouldn't be good to admit defeat like this and throw away Li City, right? Fu Riluo looked at him coldly. Throwing away Li City is much better than throwing the lives of our disciples. We have already lost this battle. Heavenly Devil sacrifice. Zhang Yi hissed, and all of his cultivation burst forth. Instantly, the blood sea in the sand table world boiled. Countless rotting corpses piled up to form a huge sacrificial altar made from flesh and blood. Zhang Yi stood on it before rushing at Qin Mu while shouting sternly, I won't die, the devils won't lose. A sword light broke through the air, stunning all the onlookers. It pierced through the sea of blood and flashed through the heart of the young devil's brows. The sword light covered 10 miles of the sky. Qin Mu lowered his sword finger from the heart of his brows, and the sword light shrunk back into a sword pellet that came flying back. Shahuali, this move is called Opening Calamity, he said indifferently. Shahuali, you can bring this corpse back for your master to see my sword skill. Shahuali looked at the corpse falling from the sacrificial altar. The hatred in his eyes burst, and 2 streams of bloody tears flowed down his cheeks. His aura suddenly became violent as well. His hair rushed upwards in fury, and he couldn't stop screaming. Admit defeat. Fu Riluo's cold voice came from outer space. You aren't a match for the 4 of them. Shahuali shouted loudly and took another step toward Qin Mu. Admit defeat. From beyond the sky, Fu Riluo's voice boomed like thunder. Your knife skills are prim, proper, and full of calculations. However, your frame of mind is already in disorder, so you will lose fast and die even faster. Your close friends are dead, so you have to take revenge for them. If you don't take revenge and just give up your life, you'd be nothing more than a boorish man. Shahuali's expression distorted, and he suddenly pulled out his knife with his left hand. Outside the sand table world, Fu Riluo frowned, but he didn't make a move to stop Shahuali, who was in the sand table world. That land was created by him and Saint Woodcutter, so if he interfered, Saint Woodcutter on the other side would also interfere. If that happened, things would become hopelessly muddled, and he couldn't be sure of success. Saint Woodcutter had been summoned from the other world earlier in the day, and disrupted his arrangements and plans, catching him off guard. That was why he could only set up such a bet. He couldn't breach the rules he set up himself, or he might lose everything completely. He needed time. Even though he admired Shahuali and the youth had his own master, he also viewed him as his own successor. However, for the great cause of the devil race, he could only endure the pain and lose him, no matter how much he admired that young man. The corners of Shahuali's eyes twitched, and the demon eye at the handle of the demon knife became stranger and stranger. The location where it was staring at wasn't Qin Mu though, but Shahuali's right arm. Shahuali raised it along with the knife. Qin Mu was right. He couldn't execute the knife skills of Luo Wushuang perfectly. If he wanted to do that, he needed to cut off his right arm. Otherwise, it would become a burden to him. His motive when coming to the lower bound was to find a way to hold knives in both hands. He wanted his knife skills to enter the path and walk out of Luo Wushuang's shadow. Just then, Qin Mu's sword had been incomparably stunning, and he felt that even he himself wouldn't have been able to avoid it. Only with a broken arm could he unleash Luo Wushuang's knife skills to the fullest. However, if he cut off his arm, he would never walk out of Luo Wushuang's knife skills and would never find his own knife path. This would be the same as cutting his own path short. Shahuali's face flickered with many emotions. Then the knife light slashed down against the ground. I've lost. He collapsed and knelt on the ground. But he didn't kneel to Qin Mu or Yu He and the rest. No, he knelt to the corpse of Zhang Yi. Shahuali bowed and got up. He picked up Zhang Yi's corpse and turned his head around. I've seen your sword skill, but I won't let my master see it because I want to kill you personally and take revenge for my close friend. Qin Mu nodded solemnly. If that day comes, I will die without regrets. Shahuali walked toward the wall of fire. His demon knife flew up and slashed it open, paving a way out. Shahuali carried Zhang Yi out, and their bodies vanished. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. Shahuali's actions left him slightly uneasy. Shahuali was no inferior to him, and the knife skill used to slash apart the sea of fire was extremely exquisite. His corporeal body, magic power, primordial spirit, and even his knife skills that showed his attainments in paths, skills, and divine arts were all no inferior to those of Qin Mu. His corporeal body was even much superior. The Shahuali now was like Qin Mu after first ancestor human emperor had given him a ruthless blow. He was on the border of breaking down and transforming. If he walked out, having found his own path, he would be like Qin Mu, who had founded the first form of his calamity sword. He would also found his knife skill and walk out from Luo Wushuang's knife skills in his search for revenge. When he turned around to walk out through the wall of fire, if I had sent a sword at him, I could have gotten rid of him. If it was Grandpa Cripple, he would have definitely done that without a moment's hesitation. Qin Mu's face flickered between clear and dark. Outside the sand table world, the black tiger god caught his expression and immediately became excited. My lord, did you see that? The corners of this brat's eyes are twitching often and his expression keeps changing tremendously, flickering between clear and dark. He even cries out in astonishment sometimes. His frame of mind is clearly not good. Saint Woodcutter gave him a stare, and the black tiger god's expression changed. He hurriedly covered his ears. Saint Woodcutter stretched out his palm and caught the handle of the divine axe. At the same time, Fu Riluo stretched his hand out to take hold of his devil's spear. Both of them pulled out their weapons. Qin Mu, who was located in the sand table world, immediately discovered that something was wrong. The space started crumbling from the place where the axe and the spear had crossed. Everything was shrinking continuously, swallowing the majestic mountains. Quickly go! Qin Mu pulled Sanghua without any explanation and beautiful runes appeared around him. They swirled as he said, Senior sister Yuhi, senior brother Shuyao, quickly come to me. Yuhi and Shuyao still stood in a daze and looked at him blankly. They seemed to have yet to return to their senses. The crumbling space was gradually closing in on them, and Qin Mu gritted his teeth as he executed his teleportation divine arts. With a flash he vanished with Sanghua. Only then Yuhi and Shuyao come back to themselves and turned back to look. Their expressions couldn't help changing drastically, and Yuhi shouted, Junior brother Shuyao, let's work together to break apart the wall of fire to rush out of this place. Their speed was extremely fast, but when they raised their legs, they realized that they had underestimated the danger. They were extremely fast and surpassed even the speed of sound. They were faster than Qin Mu running at full speed, yet the speed of the space collapsing was even greater. The wall of fire was clearly right in front of them, yet no matter how fast they ran, they could not get close to it. Not only that, the distance was even widening and they got closer and closer to the crumbling space. Cold sweat broke out on Yuhi and Shuyao's foreheads. Inside the crumbling space hid the power of the collision between Saint Woodcutter's divine axe and Fu Riluo's devil's spear. This power had created the sand table world earlier, turning a plaza that was 100 yards by 150 yards into a vast world with 1,000 miles mountain range. The falling apart of that world would definitely release the power generated by the collision of the divine axe and devil's spear. This power was not something that divine arts practitioners of Seven Stars realm could defend against. They would most likely be vaporized to the point there would be nothing left even of their souls. Could that Qin Mu who was calling us just now have wanted to bring us out? Only now did they start to regret. They were astonished by the light of Qin Mu's sword and went into a daze, so they didn't hear what he was trying to say after that. When they came back to their senses, it was already too late. At this moment, a light flashed by them, and Qin Mu suddenly appeared beside them. The countless runes swirled around them and burst forth with light. Yuhi and Shuyao felt the world spin for a long while. When they finally stepped on the ground, they opened their eyes to take a look and realized that they had come out of the plaza. Move! Qin Mu shouted out and ran forward. Hide behind the big palace. Yuhi and Shuyao hurriedly followed him toward where Sanghua was already hiding. When the four of them reunited, Qin Mu squatted down, closed his eyes, opened his mouth and covered his ears. Sanghua immediately did the same upon seeing his actions. Before Yuhi and Shuyao could even think to do the same, A terrifying wave burst forth from the center of the plaza and incomparably bright lights shone. In an instant they were blinded, and when they closed their eyes 2 lines of bloody tears were streaming down their faces. Next, the wave formed by the collapse of space rushed over them. Yuhi and Shuyao's body were pulled longer and longer as though they were noodles. Terrifying sounds rang out for a moment before their ears could hear nothing at all. It was strangely silent. Warm blood started to flow out of their ears. Above the big palace, the gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven released their god power and raised a wall of divine light, blocking the energy blasting out from the collapsed space. Even so, the 2 youths were tormented terribly. On the other hand, Qin Mu and Sanghua, who had squatted down, weren't affected much. After the light dispersed and the wave left into the distance, the 2 of them closed their mouths and opened their eyes. Yuhi and Shuyao landed on the ground with a thump and sprawled motionlessly. When they got up, both of their faces were covered in blood. The 2 of them couldn't hear or see anything. Senior sister and senior brother are still too young and hasn't experienced anything like this. Qin Mu shook his head and went forward to examine the 2 of them. I have encountered something similar to this before, and knew what would happen if I was near where a god and a devil fought. They're not too badly hurt. I will refine some medicine for them later to regrow their eye membranes and eardrums. Sanghua was worried. What happened? Their eye membranes were burned and their eardrums were torn. It isn't a big problem. Qin Mu flipped through his taotai sack in search of medicinal ingredients. If their eyes had exploded and the bones in their ears had broken, I wouldn't be able to cure it. At that point, even the brain would be all fried. Their eye membranes weren't fully burned and their eardrums only had a small hole pierced, so they can still grow back. Senior sister Yuhi and senior brother Shu Yao's corporeal bodies are indeed strong, stronger than me. If it was me, my eye membranes would have burned off completely. Sanghua stuck out her tongue and looked around. She saw that close to half of the buildings in Li City were destroyed. Everywhere were collapsed houses and pavilions. Numerous devils had collapsed to the floor, and were rolling on the ground in extreme pain. Fu Riluo pulled out his devil's spear and his 3 faces shouted in unison. One must always honor a bet. All the devils, listen up and abandon the city. Junior brother Suemo, bring all the men out of Li City. The devil gods received their orders and restrained their own devils in preparation to withdraw. Heavenly teacher, today is not a good day to fight with you. We'll continue another day. Not a problem, not a problem. Fu Riluo jumped down from the palace and led everyone in, leaving. Qin Mu at that time was refining pills to treat Yuhi and Shu Yao's injuries. When he saw Fu Riluo walking out from the corner of his eyes, he hurriedly looked at him and couldn't help becoming stunned. He saw that the back of Fu Riluo's head had thick curly hair and had no 4th face. Instead, 2 sharp ears were there, and they were very straight. He only has 3 faces. Like that, Qin Mu settled one of the questions gnawing at his heart. Ever since he saw Fu Riluo, he had wanted to know how many faces the devil had. He kept thinking about it and finally got his answer. Fu Riluo sensed his gaze and twisted his neck to reveal a face that had a smile. He said leisurely, "Your name is Qin Mu?" The blacksmith Qin Mu. The youth was about to say something when a figure flashed before him and Saint Woodcutter appeared in front of him, blocking Fu Riluo's line of sight. Qin Mu still popped his head out from the back and said with a smile, "Yes, my name is Qin Mu. I pay my respects to Vajra Devil God. You understand the devil language?" Fu Riluo indeed means Vajra. Fu Riluo nodded and said with deep meaning, "You and I are fated, so we will meet again." When he was done, he turned around and walked away. Zhahuali follow up.